I managed to get out, and the next thing I was aware of was a burning pain in my side. I looked down and I saw fresh tissue from an obvious wound.
He was bleeding pretty badly.
I thought, oh shit, please, survive, John, please.
We need to go inside, It's locked. Motherfucker. They tell me there's one bunker, and then if shelling starts, to go over to that bunker door, and then I go over to the door and it's locked. The one instruction I was given, and it didn't protect me.
И, я сижу и понимаю, что, сидеть толку нет, потому что прилетит, если в эту штуку, где мы прятались, может попасть и в окно, не дай бог, или там возле двери попадет, что осколками всех зацепит.
Все сюда! Быстро! Быстро броневик все! Все бегут!
On June 6, 2023, the Novokakhovka Dam in Ukraine's Kherson region was destroyed, causing massive flooding to the communities downstream. The deluge of water emptied out of the reservoir before submerging villages close to the Dnieper River. This put an estimated 42,000 people at risk, while trapping and killing those caught in the floodwaters who couldn't get out of the way in time. This necessitated a rescue operation, many of which were hastily organized, with volunteers coming from across Ukraine to assist. Offbeat research correspondent Dylan Burns was on the scene to document rescue efforts.
It was pretty bad in Kherson due to the flooding, so me and Alex Bardaway from New Voice of Ukraine wanted to head down there so we could film the rescue operations. We didn't really prepare any big plan. We didn't have a lot of embeds. We just wanted to head down there and film whatever we could. We almost didn't get into the city. They were very, very aggressive about safety going in. It was the first time I'd ever interacted with a checkpoint guard, and they had actively checked my body armor and helmet before entering the city. It was the first time, and I had gone to forward operating positions with the army, so I knew it was going to be pretty serious.
While in Kherson, Dylan Burns embedded with a German rescue team called Four Paws Rescue. It was made up of Robin Heller, Johannes Hinterseer, and Timo Baumeister. Their purpose for being in Kherson was to help rescue animals that could have been trapped by the flooding, with the Ukrainian environmental minister Ruslan Strilets saying that as many as 20,000 animals might have died in the flooding.
They were just like near a hostel we were staying at, and we saw them with the rescue gear and all with the vans with the logos on it. So we walked up, we started talking to them. They knew English, and from there we grew it into an embed. We got very lucky that they would allow us to film with them, and they were very interested in making sure that everything's documented, which in this instance, thank goodness that there were some cameras rolling.
Dylan Burns and the Four Paws crew were also joined by British expat volunteer John Jones, who had come to Kherson on his own initiative in order to help out wherever he could, like assisting Ukrainian animal welfare NGO UA Animals in establishing a pop-up animal shelter in an abandoned building in the city. On June 14th, the Four Paws rescue team, along with John Jones, Alex Bartaway, and Dylan Burns, headed towards a rendezvous point where they planned to meet other aid workers, including Mija Harfuch and her colleagues at Christian aid charity House of Hope, before heading out on the Dnieper River to perform rescue operations. At this point, though, they were already off to a rough start. The combination of chaotic coordination and new safety requirements for boats that required the Germans to get a boat from a local coordinator meant they were only ready to get out on the water past 6 p.m, much later than they preferred.
It wasn't very centralized, and it led to a lot of the response being very chaotic. And I think this was most clearly shown by the fact that the Germans, who got a red rescue boat from a local coordinator because the requirements for what boats you could take out the water had changed and they had to get a metal, stronger boat than the one they had on hand, they took it out to water and it didn't work. And after a conversation with somebody else, they led me to believe that they had also interacted with that boat and they had reported to somebody that it wasn't working. And so just that miscommunication could have possibly contributed to this tragedy. So this type of chaotic response was not the best environment. People did what they could on such short notice.
They were also informed that the Russians had been shelling in the area the day before, but after other aid workers came back from the river, and said it was relatively quiet on the water, they felt encouraged.
The team was somewhat divided on whether they were going to go out into the water or not. It was already getting pretty late, and there was already so many delays and people were kind of frustrated. Not to mention there were reports of shelling in the area the day before, so some people felt an obvious safety concern being so close to the Russians. But then a rescue team came back from the shoreline and they gave a story of, it's quite peaceful in the water today. It's very nice, it's very tranquil, it's relatively safe. And that might have been true for them, but obviously that was not true for us. But that was enough to convince them to keep going ahead.
The team went down from the rendezvous point to the shoreline and launched the boat into the water with Robin, Johannes, and John inside. John was helping drive the boat due to his previous experience, but as they began to run into engine troubles soon after it in the water, the team quickly had to pull out paddles. While they started to run into engine issues, Dylan, Alex, and Timo went back to the rendezvous point, not wanting to crowd the muddy shoreline with Russian positions only a few kilometers away.
I knew something was wrong when they took out a paddle for the speedboat, because that's not how speedboats are supposed to work. But at that point, they were getting help from another person out, another boat that was out on the water, a white boat full of locals. And I was called back to the Jeep because they didn't want people to gather on the shoreline due to risk of shelling, wouldn't you know it?
Even after those three left, the boat crew still couldn't get the boat running, even with the assistance of other volunteer crew. After multiple more failed attempts to get the engine started, the decision was made to head back to the shoreline, since they were unable to complete the rescue work safely without a functioning engine. Once back on the shore, a call was made for Timo, Alex, and Dylan to come pick them up and help them bring the boat back. It was after the call wrapped up when the crew started to drag the boat onto the shore at exactly 6:49 p.m. local time that the barrage began.
So then they called him on the walkie-talkie that there's a problem with the boat and he's gonna drive down with the car. And on the way, the mortar attack came in.
Suddenly, for a brief moment, a distant boom could be heard, immediately followed by the unmistakable whistle of an incoming shell. Thinking fast, Johannes immediately threw himself to the ground to take cover upon hearing the screech of the shell, just in time for it to make impact near the coast. Robin and Johannes then ran to a bunker near the shore, along with other aid and rescue workers, with the mud swallowing their legs as they tried to traverse the shoreline, working against them and slowing their escape as the shelling continued.
When we started running, I think I slipped and fell on the ground. I'm not sure I think it must have been after the first hit. And this was the first time Johannes turned around and took like 2, 3, or 4 steps maybe back to my position, helped me up, and then we ran together, basically holding hands that nobody slipped again.
Nearly a dozen aid workers had attempted to take shelter in the bunker, more than it was built to hold, with some people trying their best to squeeze into the tight space as the rescue operation was continuously targeted by artillery. During this chaos, John Jones had been hit by shrapnel from a Russian shell while standing next to the rescue boat. This caused shrapnel to penetrate both his upper thigh and lower abdomen, injuring and immobilizing him on the shore.
I heard the first shell explode. It seemed to me to be somewhere behind me. People, of course, went looking for cover, but I was stuck in the mud on the Dnipro. I was wearing hiking boots, which were full of mud, and I couldn't really move very fast. So I managed to get out, and the next thing I was aware of was another shell explosion and a burning pain in my side. I looked down and I saw fresh tissue from an obvious wound, and moments after that I collapsed on the floor.
While the shoreline was being bombed, those at the rendezvous point were scrambling for cover. When Dylan Burns heard the familiar whistle of an incoming shell, he also threw himself to the ground and headed to the door of a bunker that local police told him to use if they came under fire. But it didn't go as planned.
We need to go inside. It's locked. Motherfucker. Why would they lock the door?
Eventually, after the majority of shelling had already concluded, someone inside opened the rear entrance to let the three in. Back at the shoreline, volunteers taking cover in the bunker, like Dmitry and Nazarchik, were attempting to get to John, who was still injured and lying in the mud on the shore.
И потом, обстрел там, они потихонечку кидают, и, я сижу и понимаю, что, сидеть толку нет, потому что прилетит, если в эту штуку, где мы прятались, и мы начинаем пытаться выходить, и постоянно выход, взрыв, выход, взрыв. И мы его раз 5 пытались достать, и у нас не получалось, но это на видео даже есть, там видео, и мы его раз 5 пытались, не могли достать, потому что, постоянно кидают.
The Germans and the Ukrainians came in a large number, I forget how many, and they ran out and picked me up and carried me to a nearby cylindrical bunker that couldn't fit us all. They shoved me in, and everybody else tried to pile in.
I saw in his face that it's really critical because he get like a little bit slippery and his circulation was not the best, and I thought, oh shit, please survive, John, please.
The volunteer who had been hit, he was hit in his stomach and in his leg, and he was bleeding pretty badly. And they continued to shell us, I think, maybe 5 or 6 more times. And as the other guys were taking the one who had been hit, were carrying him to the shelter, they continued to fire at them.
Eventually, though, under fire, local volunteers were able to make their way to John and carry him back to the bunker on the shore. While John now had cover, his wounds were clearly serious, especially the shrapnel wound in his lower stomach. As the shelling continued, a discussion ensued as to whether they should remain in the bunker or run to a nearby van and flee the area. But the volunteers wanted to get John to a hospital as quickly as possible and ultimately made the decision to get out of there.
И потом его уже в легковую мы закинули, слава богу, там с Херсона волонтеры тоже такие живчики, которые шевелятся. И мы закинули раненого в легковую машину и отправили его в госпиталь. И потом сидим дальше в этом же укрытии, и надо действовать. Я говорю, всех проверил, чтобы не было ни у кого шока, чтобы не было остепенения. Посмотрел, ни у кого шока нету, говорю, все, я за броневиком. Выбегаю под обстрелами за броневиком, запрыгиваю в броневик, разворачиваюсь, с проблемами, поломал двигатель свой, переехал моторный. Представьте, обстрел идет уже, ни о чем не думаешь. И подгоняю броневик и зову всех ребят, всех, кто там был, и мы начинаем выезжать. И когда едешь в броневике, там не слышишь особо выстрелов, но ехали быстро.
As John was driven to the hospital, the German aid workers were driven back to the rendezvous point, where they were able to reunite with Dylan, Timo and Alex, before finally driving back to safety after a lull in the shelling.
After the shelling, we basically decided to get out of the city as fast as possible, mostly because of mental reasons, I guess.
John would be treated that night at a local Kherson hospital, where doctors discovered that his pelvis stopped the shrapnel in his lower abdomen, which likely saved him.
I was lucky in many ways. The shell fragment, the shrapnel, entered cleanly through my belly, around the area of my navel, at an oblique angle, and passed under the layer of muscle and tissue, then struck the edge of my pelvis and was deflected out of my body. Again, a clean entry and exit wound.
The next day, while everyone was still rattled by the previous day's events, Dylan and Alex were visiting John in the hospital when Dylan was texted a video.
Me and Alex, by the way, went to the hospital to visit John. He was pretty messed up, but he was in safe condition. And when we were talking to him and about to head out from the hospital, I get a text message from my buddy, from my good friend in Kiev. And it's a video that was very obviously the boat that we were using the day before, the red boat. And there was the white boat next to it, and it was on the exact shoreline. It was us. That was us, the aid workers, on the shoreline. And it was from the perspective of a Russian drone with a rune often used by the Nazis in the top left-hand corner. And they were playing rock music as they shelled us on video. And then they posted this online with a message about us being special forces trying to build a bridgehead on the other side of the river. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was surreal. It was kind of hard to process. It was probably the most shocking part of the entire trip.
The video in question was posted on the Disgusting 8 Telegram channel, the social media channel for drone and artillery support elements attached to the Levadia Battalion, a private military company owned by Sergei Aksyonov. Aksyonov is the head of the Crimean Occupation Authority and was installed in 2014 after Russian forces invaded and occupied the Crimean Regional Parliament building. Aksyonov's Levada Battalion are officially designated as reservists and formalized as the 30th Combat Army Reserve. The group also cooperates with the Russian Army's 150th Motorized Rifle Division and 205th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade. Members of the Levada Battalion are made to sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense under the Combat Army Reserve program, and with PMC Convoy, a company consisting of reconnaissance and assault units led by Wagnerite Konstantin Pikolov. This isn't the first time Russia has shelled civilians and aid workers in Kherson during rescue operations. Less than 48 hours after the dam was destroyed, the Russians began to shell the city of Kherson as rescue operations were still intermittently underway, posing a danger to local aid workers. In one incident, Moshe Reuven Azman, the chief rabbi of Ukraine, and his team were shelled during an aid work operation in the city. Additional reports from Ukrainian government of the direct targeting of rescue workers, similar to what we have documented, has resulted in the deaths of both local civilians and foreign aid workers. To get a better understanding of war crimes like the targeting of civilians and rescue workers in the city, we talked to an international human rights lawyer and specialist in international humanitarian law.
So my name is Sarah Kay. I'm an international human rights lawyer. I specialize in national security and specifically hybrid warfare. And as the bodies of law emerged in the aftermath of the Second World War, we saw protection of civilians extend to specifically protected professions. And this protected profession is usually human rights defenders, journalists such as yourselves, and anyone that works in a humanitarian capacity. So it's a violation of the laws of war, specifically through the principle of neutrality that is applied to
I can't get to the front door. I don't know if somebody's covering up some murder or something. But look, all in this, everything he delivered, look, it's still in the box. What the fuck is going on? Like, somebody just steps like I did before, close and leave.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to today's stream. I've got just a few stories to cover today because I want to be following the election results in the Illinois 9th, which has, of course, gotten a lot of attention, a lot of eyeballs on that race, as there is a run between a few progressive candidates, including, of course, Kat, which we've been following the adventures of Kat on the channel here, and Laura Fine, who has taken some money from J Street, and that has gotten a lot of negative attention from progressives in the country. So we're going to be paying attention to that race tonight. We're going to be covering it as the results come in. I really don't know how it's going to go. There was a last-second poll that was released that had Kat ahead by a point, but when you're ahead by a point in a poll, I mean that's not, hey, we're gangbusters here, this is for sure. And when it's such a tight race between like so many candidates, yeah, no, we don't know for sure. So we could not really know until the end of tonight's stream. What is J Street? It's like it's APAC aligned. That's the best way to describe it. APAC aligned. I need to rework my recommendation tab. Didn't expect to see Ukraine firster. Dylan Farts TV in my sidebar. This is a very original comment, and I am deeply wounded. I am deeply scarred. You know what we should start with today? You know what we should start with? I want to start with a story that has brought me much joy. Can we do that? Are you guys okay with that? And I understand if this story hasn't brought everybody joy, because it's hard for them to find joy in a principled stand by even somebody they might disagree with. But it is so funny, and I have gotten so much enjoyment from it that I quite frankly don't care about the politics, though people have been sending me DMs about the politics. You know, the politics of the partisan politics, red and blue. So I don't know if you guys know about the rapper AFROMAN, but AFROMAN is an American rapper. You know, and I got high. That was him, you know. You know, he was, besides that, honestly, I don't know many other songs. The only other song I know of his, really, because I'm not begging to rap anyway, is the song about police officers knocking down his door. If you guys don't know, there was a raid on this rapper's home. It was local news, not only because, you know, a rapper had his house raided, but also because he then proceeded, after having his house raided, to then make a music video out of the footage from his security cam footage, out of the footage of the raid, showing officers going through his home, officers looking through his pockets, officers going through the kitchen. You know, he throws out a lot of shade at the police department, and it's quite humiliating. He talks about how his door was damaged, talks about how $400 went missing during the raid that is still not accounted for. And he asks, you know, where did they get off from even doing this raid in the first place? They said that he was involved in kidnapping, but there's no evidence of kidnapping. He's not a kidnapper. He's a rapper. What's going on? And he threw a lot of shade, threw this footage around, and it went like semi-viral. It was probably the most popular AFROMAN song of the last half decade to a decade. Just because of the theatrics of it, how much he did not care, and how much the police department got embarrassed from not only a raid that was not necessary, but seemed to be for reasons that don't make any sense. They then destroy the door, and then there's apparently money that's missing. Not to mention whether or not, you know, is there a financial compensation he can be given? Can it be proven that $400 was taken? His day is ruined by coming home and seeing his door smashed, trying to figure out where $400 is, and figuring that like a bunch of men with rifles went through his home. I mean, the founding fathers did view the violation of one's homestead to be one of the most chief evils the republic was built against. And so they built it into the foundation that soldiers cannot force their way into people's homes, that you have to have a judicial warrant in order to go into somebody's home. And they get the warrant. The warrant was for reasons that make no sense. I mean, the narcotics, I mean, it's AFROMAN, but kidnapping, crazy. And so he makes a rap song out of it. Now, you think they would be smart enough to let it end there. And I know this is not foreign policy. I see a few people like, why are we talking about this? I do not care. This brings me joy, and therefore I'm talking about it. And so this man releases the song. The police department doesn't like it very much. A bunch of individual officers that are shown in the footage really don't like it. And then defamation lawsuits start getting thrown at AFROMAN. Privacy violations. That he violated the privacy of these officers by posting security cam footage of them raiding his home and kicking down his door. And then he said a bunch of things that were derogatory and in some instances libelous. Now we'll get into that in a moment, but here is AFROMAN talking about the lawsuit before we look at the court footage, because the case has started and I have spent half the day just watching the court case, wheezing, going back to the court case, wheezing, taking a break, and then going back to the court case. But let's start with him describing being sued by Adams County deputies. Adams County, Ohio, if you're curious. Ohio, big surprise?
At freedom of speech, I should be allowed to sing about my life, and police officers that violate my home, steal my money, should not be allowed to sue me.
In August of 2022, Adams County deputies raided the home of Joseph Foreman, better known as the rapper AFROMAN. They had a search warrant tied to an investigation into possible drugs and kidnapping victims.
They didn't charge me for any crimes. They didn't find no large amounts of marijuana or whatever narcotic they were saying. They didn't find any kidnapping victims.
AFROMAN was never charged with a crime after the raid. Deputies seized thousands of dollars in cash that was later returned, but AFROMAN says about $400 was never recovered. The raid also left damage throughout his home, and he says the department told him it was not responsible for paying for the repairs.
The guy started laughing and waddling his head. He goes, "We're not required to do that." And they were unapologetic.
AFROMAN used his own security footage from the raids in a music video to make money to pay for the damages sustained to his home.
I got freedom of speech, and then I used my personal life to write my music. I was going to clean my room, but then I got out. Will you help me repair my gate? Will you help me repair my door? I'm singing about what actually happened to me.
Deputies who appear in the video are now suing the rapper for the damages caused by their faces being in the videos.
Hey, we raid your house, we steal your money, we disconnect your cameras. Now we need to sue you for saying something about it.
AFROMAN filed a countersuit for the damages to his home, and Judge Jonathan Hines dismissed those charges in February.
They dismissed all of my claims with the click of a mouse in some little office somewhere without a hearing.
AFROMAN believes this lawsuit violates his free speech rights as an American and as a working artist in the United States.
As a working rapper that raps for a living and pays taxes to America with rap money, I need raw materials. Raw materials is my life experience.
I like the way, as a rapper in the United States, and he starts going back and forth with his head, emphasizing each word with a little back and forth as if he was trying to throw it at the camera. Yeah, no, he was insistent in getting his point across. He goes to local news once these lawsuits come at him, and he decides in that outfit, in that American flag suit, he decides to go to court and go blow to blow with these people. But before he goes to court and goes blow to blow with these people, he releases a few more songs. Here's just one of them to give you an idea of the theme of, I don't know if we're going to call it the hubris of, let me go and get into a PR battle with AFROMAN, with musicians. Let me go and see if we can throw shade back and forth, and we're going to come out on top by suing for defamation. What exactly are they trying to, is it just they want to pay out? They raid a man home, and then they think that that man that they raided after not finding any victims should now have to pay them for having done the deed of complaining about it to the public sphere? I mean, come on. What did they think was going to happen?
AFROMAN will bring it to ya. AFROMAN is gonna do ya.
And he sings and sings. But if you look here, he starts showing the officers involved. He's showing the officers involved. This guy right here, he did some research into, turns out he had some charges. What type of charges? Charges that have to do with improper photos of children. Anyway, that was the man going through some of his stuff that he's saying, hey, is that the guy who took my $400? I got some footage. Looks like he's taking money out of my pocket. Is that my $400? And so he just keeps digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging. He does not care. He does not care. Anyway, the police department, they, as an institution, might have backed off, but the officers themselves have decided to drag this out. Now, this man right here is one of the officers that raided his home. His name is Walters Jr. Now, Walters Jr. Was the subject of not only the original video, but also a follow-up video, which he is complaining about in this format. I believe I have that follow-up video here. Here it is.
Randy Walters is the son of a bitch. Yeah, that's why I fucked his wife and got filthy rich.
Okay, now I don't want to be the one to pay AFROMAN some dividends off this video. So that offended his character, and he said it was defamation because he was defaming him and his wife by saying that he was having intercourse with his wife. And so he brings this to court, and after talking about the emotional stress he causes him, he then immediately gets caught up in whether or not it's true or not that AFROMAN is sleeping with his wife in order to make his defamation claim, because he says he cannot 100% prove if AFROMAN was or was not sleeping with his wife, and that, you know, causes some distress. But then he says, the lawyer, having some intelligence to him, is like, okay, if that's the case that you don't know, well, then how is it a defamation case if you don't know if he's sleeping with your wife or not? Like, well, you suggested he not only sabotages his own case, but he sabotages his own case in a way that really just humiliates himself.
So you're claiming that is the defamation statement, is that he said he had sex with your wife?
Yes.
Okay. And that's painted you in a false light?
It's caused tremendous pain in my life.
I'll get to that. We have to go through false light first. So does it paint you in a false light?
Yes, that my wife is cheating on me with Mr. Foreman.
But we all know that's not true, correct?
I don't know.
Wait, you don't know if your wife's cheating on you or not?
You want to go there?
No, I just want to ask that question because you said we don't know.
I've been with that woman since middle school.
I know.
I would hope she wouldn't. But you know what? Once somebody puts it out there for their fun and entertainment, it's out there. And it's a problem.
So it's something we cannot verify the truth of? Is it a thing that can be verified, true or false?
Ask your client.
What was the plan here? They are like he has a lawyer, right? They made a lawsuit. You have to have a lawyer to do that. There must have been a plan here. At some point, there must have been a plan here. But not only is it that this man gets grilled on the stand, but they get to bring AFROMAN forward to bring more attention to his original claims against the police department. So this platform that he has built for himself out of music and news appearances is then extended into an official court record, which is then shared on social media, getting hundreds of thousands to, in some cases, millions of views. This one just got over 400,000.
I didn't know nothing. The lady at the sheriff department just volunteered the information. I was sitting there, if she had been, I might not even known I got ripped off. She admitted it live on Channel 19 News that the money wasn't right.
You remember in your deposition when I asked you why did you bring the news when you picked up the money?
Yeah, I didn't want to get beat up or Epstein at the sheriff's station after I seen him running around my house with AR-15s. So that's why I brought the news and my attorney. So to make sure I got out of that place with my money.
You brought the news to protect you physically?
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't bring the news because you already knew there was a miscount and you were going to make.
I didn't know nothing about the miscount. I didn't know. I figured they stole my money. They turned my cameras off. So if you turn my cameras off, you must got something bad in mind. I didn't know nothing. The lady at the sheriff department.
That is true. Cameras were turned off, which is a strange thing. Well, maybe they knew he was going to make a rap song out of him. They just didn't want to be in the LP. Maybe.
And the more lies, outrageous lies you tell about him, the more money you can make, right?
Fact. They never should have came to my house in the first place. Fact. If they hadn't have came to my house, they wouldn't have put themselves on the video camera and in my music career. All of this is their fact. All of this is their fault. And they have the audacity to sue me. These people and you are the predators and the victim at the same time.
So what they did, searching your house, gave you the right to do everything you
Under the circumstance that I got freedom of speech, after they run around my house with guns and kick down my door, I got the right to kick a can in my backyard, use my freedom of speech, turn my bad times into a good time. Yes, I do. And I think I'm a sport for doing so, because I don't go to their house, kick down their doors, flip them off on their surveillance cameras, then try to play the victim and sue them.
What was the plan here? What was the plan here? If the plan was to stop damages to their reputation by, I don't know, getting money, trying to get AFROMAN to record a song where I'm sorry, please kick down my door again. I don't know what they expected. But if you bring a public media star like AFROMAN into a PR battle, and you're throwing defamation cases, which are always going to have an extremely high barrier for success, and you're talking about like rap, it's like the music game. Like this is art, which is going to make it even harder. It's not like AFROMAN made a public statement where he was like, okay, here's the press conference about how I had sexual relations with everybody's wife, starting with the chief of police, then his assistant, then the head of narcotics. Like, he didn't do that. It was a rap song. there's no chance for success here. So all you can do is drag out the story. All you can do is get yourself testifying that you don't know if your wife is sleeping with the rap star that embarrassed you in front of the country, which sounds like one of the most humiliating experiences somebody could throw themselves through. So I would just say, maybe they should stop. I mean, it's not like if they'd stop this story, the story of the security cam footage in and of itself would always be around, but try to like hash this out in the public, bring it to court. Like, I'm going to bring you to court because you said you slept with my wife. It's just, all you're going to do is get more people to listen to claims of this man sleeping with your wife. That's all you're doing. You're just going to bring more attention to the fact that they raided his house and, oh, maybe the local police department is corrupt. Why would they sue him for defamation over something this silly? I mean, how was it supposed to go? Anyway, I know some people keep telling me, like, hey, don't you know AFROMAN's MAGA? I don't care if AFROMAN's MAGA. I mean, it's not like when they kicked down the door, they kicked down his door because he was MAGA, he was not MAGA. They kicked down his door because they wanted to get some kidnapping and narcotics charges on him. They kicked down his door in an improper manner because they didn't have evidence to point to him being a narcotics trafficker or a kidnapper or anything that would actually prove that he was some sort of criminal. They never charged him with anything. The fact that they kicked out his door, didn't repair it, and then $400 goes missing, and then they want to throw defamation charges at him concerns everyone, because it's ridiculous for people to think they could throw defamation charges at somebody after you ruin their day. So I don't really care if he's like MAGA or not. I mean, he could be like a groyper at the end of the day. It doesn't matter. What matters is what the police department should and should not be doing, what its officers should be doing, both for the community and for their own sanity, for their own like lack of humiliation, man. He's supposed to play in my town this weekend, Sunday. Well, I mean, it's AFROMAN. I'd go see AFROMAN. Cops kidnapped my door. Okay, let's go see if we've got any results yet for the Illinois district. We do. We do have some data. We have some data. Thank goodness we have some results. 69.7% expected votes in, with an estimated remaining amount of 34,000. Mind you, the vote totals for those in the race currently is 23,048 for Daniel Biss, 18,585 for Kat, and 15,810 for Lauren Fine, or Laura Fine. Now, Daniel Bliss, he is considered a center-left candidate. He is, generally on the center-left of the party. One thing that I noticed that I didn't particularly like about his platform is that he seemingly is very anti-Second Amendment. I mean, when I was reading the different stances of different candidates, his was the only one that said repeal the Second Amendment, which, it's pretty unconstitutional. I mean, if you go and you repeal it, I guess you're reforming the Constitution, but I don't see the need that we need to repeal the Second Amendment. It seems kind of like a silly position for somebody to take. I mean, not only have Democrats not made really any progress when it comes to gun control regulation in the country, not just because of logs being thrown into the gears of the system, there's also like a strong gun culture in the country. There's also a lot of people who don't prioritize that as a big issue. And so to take a position like repeal the Second Amendment, it just seems very silly. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to happen. I mean, he didn't say reform the Second Amendment. He just said repeal it. He didn't say, you know what, let's repeal it and have a new one, and we'll have a new amendment that covers gun control. No, he just said repeal it. So it just seems like his goal is to try to make it more difficult for people to own guns, and it's going to be very hard for him to argue against that, because I do think that's kind of his position. So it immediately just kind of turns me off of him a bit, because obviously I've expressed it in the past that I'm a pretty pro-gun guy, but also somebody says, hey, background check, red flag law. These are not words that are going to terrify me. Someone says repeal the Second Amendment, and I think that that's somebody stereotyping their campaign. In this case, that's not the case. So that's Daniel Bliss. Sorry that's the main focus, but that's the thing that stuck out to me. Obviously, he's like a local mathematician He has worked in politics locally. He ran for governor, came a way distant second before. So he has his own history if you want to look into it. But that was the thing that stood out to me. Laura Fine is the one that progressives across the country are not very happy with right now, because Laura Fine did take money from J Street. And that money has helped her campaign. But at the end of the day, we can see she's in third place here. She is not expected to win. But that has also turned a lot of people against Laura. And that also got more people out in favor of Kat, who is a candidate we've covered quite a bit here, due to some of the backlash she has gotten for pro-Taiwan, pro-Ukraine positions, and just like how she has performed in the race generally. But besides that, Kat has gotten a lot of momentum in the last few days, mainly from endorsements from Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. I believe that there was a few celebrities that even came out and endorsed her. And so she got this last second momentum that some people hoped would be able to put her over the top. But as I said yesterday, getting this endorsement the day before the election is crazy. It's unorganized. It makes it look like you came to this last second decision. I don't understand it. And what's really annoying here is if there was more organization in advance, it looks like this is going to come to a very slim margin, the result here. Daniel looks like he's going to win. Now, I'm not saying that's for sure yet. There's still a little bit over 20,000 votes to count. But if you look at these vote totals, there's a good chance that Daniel will win. He's ahead just a little under 5%, ahead by about 4,000 votes. If the vote totals stay roughly where they are, maybe he can take it. But the thing that's interesting is if you go down and you look at Bushra is a progressive candidate that had no chance of winning. If you look at a bunch of these people here, a lot of these people had no chance of winning. There was a conversation about whether or not Bushra should step out of the race. Some people don't like Kat as the more progressive of Daniel and Kat, I would say. Of the more, some people didn't like her. Well, number one, she moved in. She only lived in Illinois as of 2 years ago, despite any Chicago history that her family may claim. She's a flawed candidate from the perspective of she's coming from this influencing world and running, and she could say, I'm a journalist with Media Matters. But, I mean, how much does that experience match to a mathematician who's been in state politics before, who's been around the block before? So questions of experience, questions of, you coming over here only after 2 years running for office, people are going to have that type of carpetbagger image of you. And so Kat had some things stacking against her going into this race. And when you have all these other progressives taking vote totals away of 4,000, 5,000, in racing in a position where they have no chance of winning, like fucking zero. Bushra had no chance. Why stay in the race? Bushra stayed in the race on principle. She wanted to stay in the race. But if you take Bushra's vote total and you put it on Kat's, Kat could win it. Now that assumes everybody that would vote for Bushra would vote for Kat, which I don't think is necessarily true, but they're not going to vote for Laura. Not going to vote for Laura. And Kat is a Palestinian Gen Z progressive. And so I would say that they would probably break for Kat. And so the fact that she stayed in the race and that we had this last second ditch effort to fucking throw this football into the end zone by Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar coming in last second to back Kat is kind of annoying. It's honestly very annoying. It's very frustrating that they weren't more on top of this. That they weren't able to look at this crowded race and say, okay, let's start talking to people about what we can do to get the most progressive person winning in comparison to the ones that AIPAC is funneling money, or J Street is funneling money to, or AIPAC is funneling money against, because AIPAC really did not want Kat to win. And at the last second, the last few months, they rushed money against Kat before they even rushed money against Daniel. But eventually they gave up on that. They're like, we got to at least make sure the Palestinian doesn't win. And it looks like they might succeed. And when you're fighting for such slim margins and you're endorsing at the last second and you have these other progressives in the box, it makes me think if you just got just one candidate to drop out, maybe two, and you got these endorsements 2 weeks ago instead of the day before, then maybe, just maybe, Kat could have taken it to the end. But right now, it looks like Kat is going to end up coming up short. I'm looking at the vote totals, and the distance is not closing, and there is only about 16.5 to 17% of the vote left. My goodness. Wait, do we have like some election night music? We should have some like election night music in the background, because the results are coming in very quick. I want to give Illinois some credit here. Considering that the polls didn't close that long ago, these are quite quick results. See if we can election music. Isn't that nice? Election music. Okay, so I want to take some conclusions right off the bat. I really do. I want to throw this out there. First things first, Kat did a really, 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 really good job, regardless of whether she wins or loses here, considering how much of an institution she had behind her going into this. Not much. How quickly she was able to build name recognition, considering she just moved to the district like 2 years ago. The fact that she's doing this, I mean, we're like roughly the same age. Being able to get this close to being in Congress at this age is impressive. She was able to articulate certain complicated foreign policy positions, like her position on Taiwan and her position on Ukraine, when under pressure from the base, while still winning the support of the base, of much of the base, in the process. And showing, in my view, that support for Taiwan and support for Ukraine is nothing that drags you down in the base of this Democratic Party. This party loves Ukraine, and the party is broadly supportive of Taiwan and can understand her position. And fear-mongering about her position as starting war with China was so terminally online that even the biggest voices saying that, many of them flipped and endorsed Kat anyway. Because when push came to shove, they're, I guess, signing up for the China war anyway. Who gives a fuck? Fuck your values. Fuck anything you stand on if you don't really believe it. If you'll abandon it in a second once it, a politician like Rashida or Ilhan jumps on. I'm not saying they should have. I'm just saying it's very hard to take people serious if they're saying, oh my God, they're going to bring war with China. They're going to bring war with China. They're going to bring war with China. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh, wait, Rashida Tlaib endorsed them? Ilhan Omar endorsed them? Okay, I support them now. They're great, fantastic. Cha, 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 cha. What do you believe? Do you believe anything? No, you don't. Hey, cereal for every meal. Thank you for a raid of fucking 252 people. My God, that is a lot of people. That is exactly 252 people. That is a lot more people than's in this room. One. Well, that's in this room. My goodness. Welcome to the stream. We're watching closely the race in Illinois' 9th, which has become a microcosm in the Democratic Party's fight over AIPAC influence, J Street money influence from the general Israel lobby, as well as the future of the Democratic Party for what progressives are going to actually be promoted, are going to be grabbing the lantern of power. And right now, Kat, who I think the majority of the people in this stream was rooting for, but of course, that's just this stream, is currently down about 5%. And with 83.5% of the expected votes totaled, with only a little bit over 18,000 votes remaining to be counted, Kat has quite the challenge to climb the rest of this mountain. Serial raid? Impressive. What is this music playing now? Oh, I don't want this music. What is this? Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy. But no, as I was saying before though, like this shows that you can keep reasonable progressive foreign policy positions that are beyond the type of shit you would hear in like a Jimmy Dore stream or while you're like passing the joint around at Burning Man, right? You can have a competent foreign policy position and be a progressive. The fact that she's within like swinging distance of taking this after moving to the district like 2 years ago, I mean, that's impressive regardless. And what would ultimately probably cause her to lose isn't going to be her positions on either of those things. In fact, I think her ability to get invited on these shows to, articulate her position, to become a bigger name through the articulation of that position might have even slightly helped her. I think the thing that's going to be dragging her down again is Daniel has much more reputation in the community. He's run for governor before, for God's sake. And Kat did move into the district 2 years ago. So ultimately, the stuff that the internet was talking about, what the internet was obsessing about when it came to this race, didn't end up mattering probably at all. Like 0.0%. Besides, maybe slightly got her a few more bits of name recognition, which in a race like this, with such a crowded field, would only help her. This is one gerrymandered ass map. Let's look at the map, actually. It is goofy looking. It is quite goofy looking. Quite goofy. Lake and Cook County. You know what we don't have any results from yet? You don't have any results from this county. From the rural county. Where are they going to turn to? What do you guys think? Doesn't look like either of these districts went for Kat. The one that's closer to Chicago seems to be turning more for Kat, but even in there, like, in Cook County, it's still not, damn. There's not a lot of votes though in the rural community. We're gonna talk about like hundreds to thousands of votes. So I doubt that'll end up deciding it. She basically started from scratch. Yeah, she did start from scratch. She did. Yeah, that's the main criticism I heard about her, is that she's a content creator and the government has had enough of them. Yeah, this idea that, she was you could say journalist for Media Matters, but the other half the time they're calling her a streamer, right? And people are thinking, is this like Joe Rogan? Is this like a video game? Like, no, I don't need that. I don't need that. Because that's just a reputation. And she was able to largely overcome that and overcome the questions about her 2 years in the city or in the area to produce a decent enough result. But I mean, like, close doesn't mean shit unless it's like, what, horseshoes and hand grenades? So I don't think it's going to matter that much to her right now that she got so close. But it might matter in 2 years. Fucking 2028. She decides to run again. Would she run in the same district? I do not know. Could have mattered to a few people who pay a lot of attention to online Discord, but that cancels by the major demographic. I mean, what progressive was going to vote for Kat, then learned that she supported Taiwan and said, you know what? I'm going to go support Lauren Fine getting the J Street money. I'm going to go support Bliss, I guess. No, if you're going to support Bliss or you're going to support Fine, the more likely reason you're going to support those people is because you're not as progressive as Kat, or you don't like the fact that she's not native and she just moved here recently. Which, at least the last one to me, seems to have the most solid grounding. Man, we're at 87.7% of the estimated vote is in, only a little under 14,000 votes remaining. I mean, that's still enough that Kat's distance could be cleared, but she would have to get a very good percentage of those votes going to her in this crowded race where she's only getting 25% of the vote right now. She would need more than 25%. She would need more. Yeah, no, it's not looking good for Kat right now. In the immediate, of course. Kat was a Republican like 10 years ago. Yeah, when she was fucking 16. And I always thought that was the weirdest attack on her. When she was like 16. Somebody else, even dumber, attacked her for like supporting Buttigieg. Buttigieg. And in 2020. When she was 19. Just seems like silly reasons to not like her. I mean, I got to think about it this way. She's 1 year older than me. 10 years ago, what was I doing? Gary's mod. People are pretty hysterical about former positions. Do you not think a decade is a lot of time for people to change? I'm fine with giving people time to change. I just think that some people, like, I'm not a fan of the instant revelation. This type of, oh, like this idea that just kind of falls out of the sky and hits you. I'm not a fan of the instant revelation. Somebody has to change over time for me to take it seriously. I have to be able to see that transformation take place. That's why I don't believe Tulsi Gabbard's transformation. Because it's just happened so quickly, so instantaneously. I don't believe that the person who was warning about the dangers of World War III with the Russians in Tehran is now 100% on board with the bombing campaign. Or if she is, that she ever believed anything at all. Because that would only be the two options. If you know, it's really three options. The first option is hysteria. The second option is that it's a fast change that you're justifying to yourself for your own enrichment or empowerment, or you didn't believe anything at all to begin with. Tulsi, the biolabs in Ukraine, Gabbard. It's also why, like, the JD Vance transformation. I mean, at least that happened over a longer period. It's more believable, but it's not. I don't know how believable it really is. Man. Yeah, no, it's over. I'm gonna call it right now. I'm sorry. I don't want to be the guy. But I think if the next set comes in and it's not vibing for Kat, it's basically over. There's just not any area where she can pick up these votes, and I'm trying to figure out like a pathway. But I mean, unless she really just starts turning out in Cook County, I think it's over. She's got to get the vast majority of the votes left in Cook County. You know what? Oh God, that's a good. I gotta tweet that right now. 1 second. Sorry. 1 second. I gotta tweet this right now. 1 second. This is very important. I gotta tweet this out. This is so important. Cat can still win if Mike Pence has the courage. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, but no, it's over basically. There doesn't seem to be any pathway. Wait, what just happened? Did they just spawn more votes? Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm seeing the Democrat voter fraud happen in real time. Didn't it say before that 87.7% of the estimated votes are in, and now it's saying there's an estimated 27,000 remaining? Did it just respawn votes, or am I crazy? I was sworn there was less votes. Well, thank you, George Soros. George Soros, I appreciate that. See, I said if Mike Pence had the courage, something could happen. Here it is. Also, if you guys want to feel better, here is a Russian drone recruiter trying to recruit the youth in Russian students. You know, hey, go join the drone forces. The future is now.
Burns is an immoral, corrupt, bankrupt man.
And he just fucking walks away. Goodbye. Beautiful. If Mike Pence has the courage, Cat can still win. Hey, Bombsheller, thank you for the 20 months. Hi, Dylan chat, popping in to show some love. Happy you're doing well. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for stopping in. By the way, can I just throw out there, because I just know how much Cat's support for Ukraine infuriated so many people online, her support for Ukraine and Taiwan. Every single candidate in this race supports Ukraine and Taiwan. For anybody who's going to feel particularly bad at the results tonight, because, you know, I'm more progressive, of course. And I think that Daniel's position on the Second Amendment is abhorrent. But every single person in this race supports Ukraine, Taiwan. They might not have gone into detail about it, but there's nobody in this race that are ideologically not aligned with that or would not vote if the Democratic caucus came over and Hakeem Jeffrey says, get the fucking line for this Ukraine vote. They'll do it. Because that's not really a debate in the Democratic Party. Like Taiwan, that might have some more flexibility in exactly where your position can lay, as, you know, whatever administration tries to avoid a war with China while also not abandoning Taiwan. But Ukraine is like, I mean, honestly, it feels like Democratic Party gospel right now. And I'm for it. I'm all for it. Power to the people. Take back the House. Throw a log and everything. You want to pass any fucking housing bill? You want to pass any bill doing anything? You want to pass the Save America Act? You want to save your own ass act? You got to pass some Ukraine aid funding. Okay, we're going to come back to these results. Right now, Kat's in a bit of a pickle, and I don't think she can get out of it. There's a very slim chance of it, but we will come back. We'll look at more of the votes, because Cook County is the area that's closer to where she's supposed to be based out of, and she is doing better there than if you were to go to Lake County, which, of course, you're talking about much smaller numbers here. Bliss is doing much better over there. But it's a closer margin in Cook County, so maybe if the numbers run right, she can close the distance somewhat. But if she can only win by like a couple hundred votes. That even at this point, like it's not. It's not good for Cat. Dog people rejoice. Okay, let's move on to some other news. Number one, I want to talk about briefly what happened with the American government in Syria. So there was a report that came out that the American government had been trying to convince the Syrian government to move into southern Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah, which is right now engaged in what it probably views from its position as an existential battle with Israel. Because if Iran goes down, one of its main funders go down, and then getting shipped new weapons and all this other stuff is going to be quite a problem. And Israel can, quite frankly, just grind them down. If you don't have the resources to pay people, if you don't have the resources to arm people, then having a armed force outside of the power of the state of the official armed forces of Lebanon is going to become exponentially much more difficult. And they're going to have to find other means to finance their activities, whether it be criminal or otherwise, but it likely will not be enough. And so them firing into northern Israel, getting into this fight with Israel in their support of Iran after they just swore loyalty to the Ayatollah, shows a existential struggle. Not to say that it is an existential struggle, but that they can view it in that manner quite easily. Now, the accusation is that Israel, thinking about moving in and doing an invasion into southern Lebanon, where over 1 million people have already been displaced from their homes, that this operation, whether or not Israel goes in with the troops, whether or not they don't go in with their troops, that Hezbollah cannot be armed. Part of the operation is to go after Iran's proxy network. And if the Iranians will not negotiate, we're going to stop sending our money to the proxies. We're going to stop sending guns to the proxies, etc. Then we have to do it ourselves is the idea. But the problem is we don't want to do it ourselves. The United States doesn't want to. This is the biggest threat to Israel. So, of course, Israel wants to get involved. But it just being Israel versus Hezbollah is going to divide public attention, divide public opinion. A lot of people in Lebanon blame Hezbollah for the violence that's going on. They, of course, blame Israel too, but they blame Hezbollah for getting Lebanon into struggles it cannot surely win. And so that's not to say everyone will get behind Hezbollah if Israel is the only one attacking it. But if it is, then it looks like another struggle between Hezbollah and Israel, which is, of course, the arch nemesis of each other. Whereas if the Syrians get involved, not only is the card stacked larger against Hezbollah, and they're pressed from multiple angles, but it could also make it look like, oh, snap, it isn't just Israel. It's also Israel and Syria. This is a fight that cannot be won. More of a morale crusher. And you have more manpower on the ground to actually disarm Hezbollah, which, might have been previously agreed to, but they're not currently agreeing to. I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think this is a good idea for a bunch of reasons. Number one, I think that if this was to happen, it's probably not going to get a lot of support from the Syrian public, because the Syrian public are pretty tired of war, and getting dragged into this new regional war is probably something they're not interested in. Not to mention, Syria is a very diverse country, and they don't want to heighten tensions within its own borders. It just right now, you have terror attacks against Christians. You have heightened tensions right now. You're reforming the country. We just saw that Damascus banned alcohol outside of a few select stores and area. They want to be managing their own affairs, figuring all that stuff out, I guess. They don't want to be getting involved in this large regional war. So it did not surprise me that the U.S. ambassador to Turkey denied this. This is right from him. Reporting regarding the United States encouraging Syria to send forces into Lebanon is false and inaccurate. But I understand where they were coming from. See, the supporter, how do I put this? Let me just phrase it this way. Tehran and Jolani, al-Shara, sorry, don't want to use his dead name, are not good friends. They fought brutal wars against each other through proxies for the better part of a decade in Syria. It was Iranian-backed militias that fought al-Nusra and other rebel groups relentlessly to try to keep Assad in power. And after 13 years of bloodshed, after 13 years of just terrible, terrible conflict, that failed. And all of the people All the horses and all the king's men could not put Assad's kingdom together again. It all fell apart, and all those deaths that Hezbollah directly suffered, fighting and defending the regime of the Assad family, ended up being superfluous, ended up being essentially pointless, as they lost their land, their land path to Lebanon. And now that you've got somebody in charge of Syria that fought against Iranian militias for so long, they're not going to open up any land passageway. I remember having this debate with Cam Higbee back in the day, talking about why it's in America's best interest to work with the new Syrian government. But it is not in their interest to work with the Iranians that defended the last regime for 13 years and wants to use their country as a passageway for smuggled weapons, which then could make it a target for strikes, which has already been a problem post-revolution as the Israelis relentlessly bombed Syria, destroyed their tanks, destroyed weapon storage, etc. So I understand where somebody somewhere in DC could have gotten the idea that this is actually a good plan, that if we could get the Syrians to go fight the Hezbollahs and the Khatibs and all the bad voodoo American enemies, everybody with a bad vibe. But they don't want to do that. They don't have any interest in doing that. And what are you going to give the Syrians in return for that, in comparison to some version of peace, even if there's civil strife within the country? After 13 years, I think peace is one of the most valuable things to the Syrian people, and it's going to be very difficult to get them to give it up for nothing. Also, I thought this answer from Trump was fascinating.
Mr. President, in Iran, because the Iranian regime has told Sky News, if you put boots on the ground in Iran, it will be another Vietnam. Are you afraid of that?
No, I'm really not afraid of anything.
What am I supposed to do with this? I'm not afraid of it. How do we get a straight answer from this man? Is it possible? I know, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Now we have a war being guided by him with very little to no congressional oversight, no congressional declaration, for an immediate threat that has not been clearly defined, being led by a man who does not feel compelled to answer questions like that. Wants to leave the option on the table, and I understand wanting that strategic flexibility, even if you don't want to pull that lever. But to not talk to the American people about why you're engaging in this war, launching it, and then being grumpy and angry about the fact that the American people don't support it, and getting even more angry about the fact that American allies won't support it. Like 73% of the Japanese public do not want to get involved, have no interest. The vast majority of the British public don't. The vast majority of most European publics don't. And they live in democracies that have elections. In some cases, there are democracies that if they wanted to get involved, they might actually have to have a vote about the matter. And so for him, after not consulting with these countries, to launch a surprise war on February 28th, that is now dragged into mid-March and will likely go through the end of March, who knows how long, and then getting surprised that after not briefing them beforehand, and then launching this war upon them after publicly trashing them and saying we didn't need their help anyway, trashing their countries. We just had one American official calling the British fleet a bunch of rust buckets, and then again asking for them to support the operation. America's public diplomacy seems to have a few failures. Well, a few failures, I think, is putting it lightly. I think it's actually putting it way too lightly. Also, when I say he doesn't believe in congressional oversight, I mean he doesn't believe in congressional oversight in any manner. He says that when it comes to pulling out of NATO, despite the fact that Congress, including his current Secretary of State, voted for and passed legislation explicitly stating that the president needs permission from Congress to pull out of NATO because there was fears of what Trump might do to the NATO alliance and pull out without congressional approval. And his current Secretary of State, his current National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio, voted in favor of the legislation that Trump now says he doesn't need to listen to.
Are you rethinking the United States' relationship with NATO possibly getting out?
Well, I'm disappointed in NATO that we spend trillions of dollars on NATO. Think of it, trillions over the years, many trillions of dollars. It's one of the reasons we have deficits and we help other countries. And when they don't help us, I mean, it's certainly something that we should think about. I don't need Congress for that decision. As you probably know, I can make that decision myself. I'd work with some very smart people. And I'd always deal with Congress anyway, but I don't need Congress for that decision. But, you know, when you say rethink, I have nothing currently in mind, but I will say that I'm not exactly thrilled when we help them with Ukraine. Look, Ukraine would have been over in one day if we didn't help. Frankly, Ukraine would have been over in the first day. They had the best equipment in the world. It was our equipment.
Okay. So, number one, he needs Congress's approval to pull out of NATO. Thank God he needs Congress's approval to pull out of NATO, or he would have threatened to probably do it much earlier. That's not to say that he couldn't just say ignore NATO's principles. If somebody was to say call upon Article 4 to have a meeting after a violation of one of their nation's territory, he could just not care, not show up. He did say when debating why the United States needs Greenland, even though Greenland's part of NATO and America could put troops on it anyway, after we had decreased troop deployments according to our old plans for decades, one of the things he said was, well, because I don't like to protect something I don't own. If that in its very utterance isn't everything that is the antithesis to what NATO is supposed to stand for. NATO is a defensive alliance. When I hear Trump demanding participation in a war of choice against the Iranians, and then citing the fact that they're part of a defensive alliance, it doesn't make any sense. You're taking offensive action. You might say it's to stop an atomic weapon. I don't see how we're closer today than we were 2 weeks ago necessarily to that goal. Degrading ballistic missiles, sure. Degrading Shahid protection, sure, at least for now. Taking out the Ayatollah, I didn't know that was a means of it. You know, I didn't know that was an end of it in and of itself. You know, you take out the Ayatollah, he's an 86-year-old man. I mean, you didn't think they planned for an 86-year-old man to die? Of course they did. That's why they have another Ayatollah. Hey, Blonde Bondsheller, thank you so much for the gifted. I appreciate that. You didn't need to go and do all that, but I do appreciate it.
Immoral, morally corrupt,
bankrupt man. Giving support to Ben Hard. What a name. Hinori Kamsel. What a name. Shiv. Great name.
Burns
Blade
is
Cruz,
an immoral,
and
morally corrupt,
post-scarcity
bankrupt
cat.
man.
I like post-scarcity cat. That is a fun name, actually.
Burns is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Immoral, morally corrupt. Immoral, morally corrupt. Immoral, morally
Burns
corrupt.
is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
We do need to change that donation sound. I've had it for way too long. Then again, I mean, I get like a Pavlovian response. Immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man. I have like a Pavlovian response to it now. Okay, we have more results. Cat is a little closer.
A curd is a curd.
Longballs gifted 3 tier 2 subscriptions. How long do you think this war will last? I think it will last at least 3 months.
Thank you so much for the 3 tier 2s. Tier 2s in site chat. Place where you get the most bang for your buck when donating to the channel. As Bop and Wap comes in with the tier 1 for 22 months. My goodness, I appreciate all the support. Appreciate all the donations. How long do I think the war will last? I cannot tell you. Because if we were talking about this from just the interests of the United States.
Patches has donated $50. Tired of hearing Andrew. So here's more Andrew.
Thank you for the $50, Patches. I do appreciate that. Patches, longtime viewer of the channel. I appreciate your support. So how long do I think the war will last? So we're going on a month now. I would not be surprised if this war lasted 2 months. Now, it could keep going. It could become a frozen or kind of like on and off war where every few weeks we come in and we drop a bunch more bombs and go out. Because I mean, if Trump never had a formal declaration of war and he just let loose bombing and Congress doesn't stop him, what stops him from just coming in and doing more bombing runs when he feels like it in part of the negotiation process to stop an atomic weapon? Or if he believes that he needs to, as the Israelis would put it, mow the grass, which is a very sterile way of putting what is happening, especially when you look at Israeli strikes in Iran. I look at some of these Israeli strikes in Iran at checkpoints and such, and my God, they don't give a fuck if there's some civilians right. They just boom, boom, boom. Well, we told everybody to evacuate 3 hours ago in a country that has wide-spanning internet blackouts, so it's totally fine. And I said it should have been like half the city, so that's basically evacuation. That's basically like a humanitarianism. What the fuck do you mean? It's crazy. I'm sorry. Like you can, I don't talk about this in detail because I think most people take it as a given now, the way Israel conducts many of its strikes. But no. I understand they're going to conduct strikes, but I mean, fuck, you've already taken out most of the visible military targets. Now you're just trying to take out the officials. Did you need to take out the officials on the crowded street? The thing scares me when I hear it, that I'm a morally corrupt, bankrupt man. Anyway, point is, I understand that people see the Ayatollah dying. They see that the head of the, Security Council dies, who was essentially like leading the country's armed forces at this stage, like giving general orders diplomatically and militarily, even though command and control right now is very disjointed. This is one of the highest ranking officials in the country, a man who was heavily involved in the nuclear non-proliferation negotiations of the Obama administration and of the Trump administration. Then, of course, you've got the other Soleimani, not the one that died before, but a new Soleimani that now the world knows of because he got blown up. He was the head of the paramilitary Vajid forces. Sorry, I mispronounced it, but I'm not a man of the Farsi language. But point is, he basically led a militia that kept the country in favor of the Iranian Revolution. That is essentially his role. That is what he did in office. And they can keep taking these people out, but if they keep getting replaced, then what does that matter? Ultimately, what does that matter? And so I can sit here and I can say, well, maybe the war will last a week or two more, and then the regime will have lost so much leadership that a revolution can happen. But I've seen nothing on the street like that. Maybe I could say that the bombing will go on and will eventually extend to economic apparati. Like, for example, Karg Island. But the administration has reasons to not do that. They have motivations economically not to do that because that will lessen world supply, having a worse effect on the pump.
Longball's got a tier 4 subscription. Have you heard that the new Ayatollah is gay?
I did hear the new Ayatollah of Iran is gay, and good for him. Good for him. I guess he has to get a sex change. That's, for those of you who don't know, that is a real thing in Iran. If you are homosexual, if you're caught as homosexual in Iran, they castrate you. And I call it castration because if you have a medical condition where sexual reassignment surgery is going to help you, then that's medical treatment. If you don't, then it is castration, because then you are forcing somebody to lose the medical organ that is what they want. I mean, they're losing you're cutting off their cock. I mean, for example, amputation is perfectly permissible in a circumstance where somebody will die if you don't cut off their leg. But if you just knocked me out and cut off my leg, I'm not going to call that medically necessary treatment. I'm going to call it what it is. You're cutting me up. I still, some people just like, they really just fall for like the fucking shit in their feet. I remember people reposting the sex reassignment surgeries in Iran as like, oh, look how progressive they. I'm sorry, I remember that pissed me off a lot back in the day. I don't think about it that much anymore, but it used to really piss me off. Maybe because I don't see people talking about it anymore. Maybe people smartened up on it. I'd like to think that's the case. I assume it isn't. Also, I see that I haven't wished anyone a happy St. Paddy's Day. Well, happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody in chat. I'm sure all the Irish Americans in chat are truly learning their Irish language on Duolingo and are inspired by the Emerald Isle and are ready to go home and become a provo. Look, I hope you all had fun. You drank a little bit. You had fun with your buddies. Saw somebody wearing green. You hit them over the head or something. I don't know. Hope you had fun. You liberals, you want me to learn a language that's called Gaelic? Okay, yeah. You ain't gonna catch me with that woke. Learning Ukrainian is easier than Gaelic. I've gotten to the point where I can kind of read Ukrainian, which is good. I just need to know what the words mean now. So one step at a time. One step at a time. Happy St. Paddy's Day. What's this image? Oh, look at that. Ireland has not been a big supporter of Ukraine. They've taken refugees and stuff. They've given a little bit here, a little bit there. But that famed Irish neutrality has always restricted action. But they have been very humanitarian in their support. And of course, you've got some good Irish international volunteers. I don't know if this is one of them, but there has been a few of them. Got to give them credit. Okay, so back to the war in Iran. We're just talking about how long I think this war is going to last. I don't know, because I don't know if Trump is going to be serving the interests of the state or the interests of himself. Starting a major operation like this and not being able to come home with some, I'll talk in his language, like scalps. Come home with something that is worthwhile. Not just, hey, look, we killed the Ayatollah, but this is what was achieved. Might be useful. Coming home with something more than scalps. Coming home with an achievement. If you say unconditional surrender and then you don't have unconditional surrender, well, that could extend the war. If you say you need to choose the next leadership, but then they choose the next leadership without you and it's quite hardline, well, then that's going to be a problem. If you say you want to stop their atomic weapons program, but there's no cooperation in the cessation of the atomic weapons program, and we have yet to get the radioactive material out of the country, well, then we haven't really stopped the atomic weapons program. And if the hardline government is the hardline government that we know it to be with Moshaba, then we know that they will probably not end the program. Ballistic missile program, 10 ballistic missiles were just fired at Israel last night. Drone program, drones are still firing. The factories might have been damaged. But they still have some storages of missiles. They still have some storages of drones. And I'm not surprised by the fact that they are able to still produce some drones likely in the country. Missile production, probably low if existent in any way. But point is, they still have a ballistic missile program. They still have a drone program. Proxies, they're still around. Hezbollah still firing rockets into northern Israel. The Houthis are on standby to blockade the Red Sea if the situation escalates. They still have militias in Iraq like Kataib Hezbollah. So these standards for achievement, we've gotten the goal, we've gotten the trophy on this. We haven't gotten anything like that. We've made progress on degradation of their forces. We've degraded their navy. We say we've destroyed their navy, but we haven't dealt with the Mosquito Navy of Iran. What is that? The Mosquito Navy is a bunch of tiny submarines and skipper boats that can go out at sea and sink civilian vessels by using sea mines, or in the case of the tiny submarines, explosives that, would be able to blow a hole in the hull of the ship. Not to mention, there's still the active threat of sea drones. We don't know how many sea drones the Ukrainians, well, not the Ukrainians, Freudian slip. I think sea drones, and I immediately imagine a Russian ship going kaboom under a, they say the Sea Baby, but the Sea Baby wasn't the main one that did it, actually. That's the SBU's baby. That's the SBU's creation. It was actually mostly military intelligence drones that did the majority of the damage, but the Sea Baby, that was the star. That was the name people remembered. Either way, I hear sea drones, I immediately think the Ukrainians, but the Iranians could very well have a storage of sea drones available as well. And if there was an American naval mission that went through the Strait of Hormuz trying to escort ships, after the Iranians had not come to a conclusion on whether the Strait of Hormuz would be opened or not again, I'm not confident in our ability to get through it without casualties, especially with this touch and go approach of will they, won't they truly ask for ally support while not spitting in their face. Doesn't help that our mine clearers are in like Malaysia right now. That was the last place they were spotted. There are some other ships that could help. I'm sure we can maybe get the Saudis to help with clearing some mines in the Strait of Hormuz. But the fact that we didn't work this all out beforehand kind of shows me that while the Trump administration might say that they had a plan to deal with the Strait of Hormuz, because Pete Hegseth was very offended when he was asked, reports say that there was no plan. He said, oh, well, we've been planning for it for years in the military. Then why aren't the assets in the region? Why are we not clearing mines if there are mines? Or know if there is or not mines, because we're fucking going through and able to tell, hey, look, we went through this area, there's no mines, let's go. Why are we not working to reopen the Strait of Hormuz? Because they can't, because they weren't ready, because they didn't communicate these plans with anyone, and the administration is mainly advised by morons who should be nowhere near the levers of power, because expertise is frowned upon, but friendship and loyalty to the president is chiefly rewarded. And so that meant the type of people that would be in Trump's ear are going to be fucking Tulsi Gabbard, Marco Rubio being the one with the most sense in the room somehow, and like Pete Hegseth. And so it's not that crazy to me, the idea that Jared Kushner never brought this up to him, the idea of the Strait of Hormuz. And the way that they've acted would not surprise me that they were not ready for this. And if you listen to Trump talk about it, I mean, he pretty blatantly says, despite Pete Hegseth's claims, that no, I mean, we were not told.
And power. Look what happened in the last 2 weeks. They weren't supposed to go after all these other countries in the Middle East. Those missiles were set to go after them. So they hit Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody expected that.
Thank you. You were talking about Iran a couple times today and what they did after Epic Fury began. You said they hit Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody expected that. We were shocked. Are you surprised that nobody briefed you ahead of time that might be their retaliation?
Nobody, no. The greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit. They were, I wouldn't say friendly countries. They were like neutral. They lived with them for years. Peter, they were going to take over the Middle East. They were going to knock out Israel with their nuclear weapon. But after we knocked out their nuclear potential weapon, they started building missiles, thousands and thousands of missiles. And they were going to do it with missiles while they developed. These are sick people. While they developed nuclear, somehow they were going to start at a different site, because that site was, you saw the site, the mountain. They were going to go into a certain area, which we know exactly where it is, and they were going to do that. And it's incredible what we've done. I tell you, the job we've done. You know,
So they needed help because they didn't know what they got themselves into. And it seems that the administration officials around Tulsi Gabbard, that Tulsi Gabbard helped appoint, like Joe Kent, also didn't exactly know what we're getting ourselves into. Here is the head of counterterrorism in the United States. This is, again, the head of counterterrorism in the United States. We just had our DHS head, Kristi Noem, get fired and get replaced with Mullen. which might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but even if he was, it takes time to move from position A to position B. And in that time period, there might be some leadership lag, I think might be the best way to put it. And that is the role of the Department of Homeland Security. It's supposed to do Homeland Security in the homeland. Then you have the head of counterterrorism quitting in the midst of a war that Donald Trump and Republicans have warned for years could bring Iranian-backed terrorism to the United States. The only actual warning of any type of possibility of an attack in the United States that has been brought to the public's attention was a report made to the Californian police departments across the state saying that there were aspirations that may be attempted by the Iranians to get drones onto a shipping vessel and then try to do some attack. But it talked about it in completely aspirational terms. So the idea that they had actually achieved the means or they had even started the operation, it sounded like something that sounded like somebody got a picture of a whiteboard. That's what it sounded like. That's the closest we got to anything resembling in the public discussion a imminent attack on America. And that only came out post-bombing. That only came out in early March after the operation started and the Ayatollah was killed on February 28th in the opening hours of the operation. Now the head of counterterrorism is quitting during this period, saying that after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center, effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. It has been an honor serving under the President of the United States in DNI Tulsi Gabbard and leading the professionals at the NCTC. May God bless America. And his full statement includes a claim that there was no imminent threat against the United States, which was the justification that Trump used in order to launch this attack. President Trump, after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of National Counterterrorism Center, effective today. This was a Tulsi pick. This is somebody Tulsi wanted working under her. And this is somebody that Trump's team had to fight for somewhat in the confirmation process. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I support the values and foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, and 2024, which you enacted in your first term. Until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars. You demonstrated this by killing Qasem Soleimani and by defeating ISIS. Well, we concluded Operation Inherent Resolve, which was an ongoing operation from the Obama administration. Early in the administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign. That wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States, and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie, and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into a disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times, and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, I cannot support sending the next generation to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people, nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray that you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and what we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further towards decline and chaos. You hold the cards. It was an honor to serve in your administration and to serve our great nation. Joseph Kent, director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Wow. Number one, this is what you get for trusting Tulsi Gabbard. This is what the Trump administration gets. He thought he was getting shooters, but then he recruited Tulsi. And she has the worst aim of anyone in Hawaii. She ain't a good shooter. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, the way he talks about this is that there was a misinformation campaign in order to drag us into the war. Who launched the misinformation campaign? The main culprit, or at least the main suspect, not culprit, the main suspect, I would imagine, would have to be Israel. Israel is the nation that he's pointing the finger at for the majority of this letter as dragging us into not only this war, but he's also saying dragging us into the war in Iraq as well. While Israel was not the main proponent for us going into Iraq and overthrowing the regime of Saddam, Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis were supportive of the idea. So I wouldn't say they dragged us in, but they encouraged us. And so that is what he is referencing there. It is true that he lost his wife in a suicide bombing. That was back in 2011. And Joseph Kent does seem to genuinely believe that this is not in the best interest of the country. Now, whether or not he's leaning into this for public show for himself. It was in 2018. I thought it was 2011. Okay, now you just said it was 2019. Okay, Bleak, can you know what time it is before you correct me? Am I going to have to stop the stream to double check? 2019. Okay, she died in 2019, not 2011. She was killed by an Islamic State bomber, so that makes sense. I think my head immediately just went to the Syrian Revolution for some reason. So I do think that this is something he genuinely believes, as I was trying to say. But if it's for his own personal aggrandizement to help bring positive attention to himself, whether this is, and he's trying to take advantage of a section of the Republican Party that stands against this type of interventionism, whether this is him trying to make a point and he just wants to make a point about the war and see if he can get America to pull out, to back off. Whether it's a combination of both of these things, I cannot say. But this is very, very embarrassing for the administration. To have the person who's supposed to be your head of counterterrorism, when you say you're fighting the Iranians for a bunch of reasons, including the support of what you call terrorist proxies, is not on message. And again, having both the head of DHS get fired and then they put in Mullen, and they're having that transfer, you moving from point A to point B, to then have this man resign. I mean, this leads me to believe that right now the leader in the United States that's the main guy on terrorism right now would probably be Kash Patel, which is the scariest sentence I have said today. That is something that I do not want. Is the person I would have in the front and center here. Not only because I don't think he's an expert in counterterrorism, but also because he's got like a really bad record when trying to communicate to the public, whether it be on the Epstein case, whether it be in the aftermath of Alex Peretti and Renee Good shooting. Like, for example, when he questioned whether or not gun owners should even have the right. No, not if they should. If they have the right, he said they shouldn't bring guns to protest, that's illegal.
As Christie said, you cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right to break the law and incite violence. We will, of course, always protect your First Amendment speech. And if you peacefully protest, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you have seen a trend here, not just in Minnesota, but across the country, in these protests turning into violent scenarios and people attacking law enforcement. That's when you go over the line, and that's when.
So I would say I do have some concern about that being the man that is currently has the whole nation in his hands when it comes to countering a terrorist threat. Well, I don't think that the threat of Iranian terrorism in the United States is extremely substantial, and I don't think I've been convinced that they've been able to penetrate public life. If we're engaged in a war, we should have consistent leadership that has to deal with threats engaging the United States, especially when we're talking about asymmetrical threats like terrorism from a country that has done, bombings that have killed American servicemen and soldiers in, terrorist attacks before, like in Lebanon. So this right here is embarrassing. Not only when it comes to, hey, this is somebody that you appointed turning against you on this issue. This is somebody saying that there's no imminent threat. He's saying, he said that there's no imminent threat, that he was convinced by lies and deceit that there was an imminent threat. So he's basically saying the entire administration is lying, that we were about to be attacked by Iran in some way, which they've still not been able to fully clarify. So, there might be something to that. And I would say that this type of stance within the party is the biggest sign yet of a divide between the hawkish interventionist wing of Trumpism around Trump and the anti-interventionist, especially anti-Israeli interventionist wing of the party. Now, whether this is going to format into something significant come around 2026, when you got people like, what? When you've got people like Nick Fuentes coming out saying he's not voting Republican. In fact, if people should do anything, they should vote blue to punish the party for being the servants of Israel. Of course, Nick Fuentes, I would not say is the Republican Party base, but you have enough people break over this issue, including administration officials, in big public displays like this, where, look at the interaction this guy's getting on social media. This is on Twitter. If we were to refresh it, this is what, like roughly 73.6 million views, 682,000 likes, 60,000 comments, 209,000 retweets. And this was only tweeted earlier this morning. So this still is going to make the rounds throughout the night and into the next day, especially when you add on top the fact that this has been covered by CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, One America News Network, Newsmax. Like everywhere. The written press, the mainstream news media, and alternative media is getting covered everywhere.
A curd is a curd.
More mic fund. Open mouth smile.
Thank you for the $10. I appreciate that. I will try to order a mic, I think, sometime this week. My God, my mic hates me. It hates my ass. Hates me. Appreciate it, Lewis. Anyway, this is a fucking catastrophe for the administration, both in leadership, public relations with the whole country, public relations within the own party, and how are you going to tell the public now that there's an imminent threat without defining what that imminent threat was after he calls into question that there was an imminent threat? What do you do in response? Well, number one, you get the person that he was respecting in this, Tulsi Gabbard, to respond to this and to say, don't worry, there was an imminent threat. Donald Trump was overwhelmingly elected by the American people to be our president and commander-in-chief. As our commander-in-chief, he is responsible for determining what is and is not an imminent threat, and whether or not to take action he deems necessary to protect the safety and security of our troops, the American people, and our country. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence is responsible for helping coordinate and integrate all intelligence to provide the President and Commander-in-Chief with the best information available to inform his decision. After carefully reviewing all the information before him, President Trump concluded that the terrorist Islamist regime in Iran posed an imminent threat, and he took action based on that conclusion. Threat. What was it? 9/11? Planes into our towers. You can clearly define the threat. World War II? Pearl Harbor. We can clearly define an attack and a threat that posed from it. A different terrorist group's attacks? Well, we can point to a bombing or a plot or something. World War I, we could point to a plot where the Germans were talking to the Mexicans about taking American territory, right? There's some, I mean, well, that's not even evidence of an imminent attack. That's evidence of fucking something, anything. But this is just, again, they just keep saying imminent threat, imminent threat, imminent threat, imminent threat, but they don't define what the imminent threat is. The imminent threat is to my brain cells. You got to define what it is, especially if you're the no war with Iran woman who is selling t-shirts during her campaign against this very outcome. And now that the war has come with no congressional oversight, you've dropped everything you've ever believed in to come up and say from the rooftops, we were under imminent threat. We must bomb Iran. We must go to war. We're under imminent threat. What is that imminent threat? Stop asking questions. We're under imminent threat. The president has defined it as imminent threat. He is the one who can figure out if it's imminent threat. Don't ask if it's imminent threat. It is imminent threat. It is his determination and his determination alone that will determine what's an imminent threat. It's also his determination that he's never lost an election. So I don't think his determination necessarily has the best track record, especially if it has to do with issues that directly concern him. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, released an essay in response to this. And looking at that ratio, not looking good. It's not looking good. There are many false claims in this letter, but let me address one specifically, that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. This is the false claim that Democrats and some in the liberal media have been repeating over and over. As President Trump has clearly and explicitly stated, he had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States first. What's the evidence? I mean, come on. We remember the name Colin Powell. You can't treat us that stupid. You got to put some effort in. At least try. At least charade something out. At least post get a crayon out, scribble something. Say, kill America, and say this was sent in the mail to the president or something. I don't know, anything. This evidence was compiled from many sources and factors. So we know that there is evidence from a source compiled with factors of an imminent threat ill-defined. President Trump would never make the decision to deploy military assets against a foreign adversary in a vacuum. Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. The Iranian regime is evil. It proudly killed Americans, waged war against our country, and openly threatened us all the way up to the launch of Operation Epic Fury. Iran was aggressively expanding their short-range ballistic missiles to combine with their naval assets to give immense immunity, meaning they would have a degree of capabilities that would have given them immunity to hold us and the rest of the world hostage. What they mean is hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage, which we're doing right now anyway. The regime aimed to use those ballistic missiles as a shield to continue achieving their ultimate goal, nuclear weapons. Well, if this has to do with nuclear weapons, then that's not an imminent threat because they didn't imminently have an atomic weapon about to be launched at the United States. And if they were about to achieve a nuclear weapon, you can tell Congress, tell the Gang of Eight, tell our allies, and try to figure out where to go from there. You don't just go on a balls-to-the-wall, one-man operation to go just bomb the country to the ground without any consultation to our allies, which you're going to then ask for support from, who many of whom are then going to deny you, not only due to public opposition within their own countries, but also from a clear guidance of exactly where this is going. The president, through his top negotiators, gave the regime every possible opportunity to abandon this unacceptable course by permanently giving up their nuclear ambitions in exchange for sanctions relief free nuclear fuel, and potential economic partnership with our country. But they would not say yes to peace because obtaining nuclear weapons was their fundamental goal. President Trump ultimately made the determination that a joint attack with Israel would greatly reduce the risk to American lives that would come from a first strike by the terrorist Iranian regime and address this imminent threat to American national security interests. So the threat was that they could strike us first, or they were going to strike us first, or that they would strike us first after an Israeli attack, that they were about to have an atomic weapon. This is, how do you post so many words in me? Why even write this much if you're not going to say anything? If you're not going to say anything, just don't say anything. Just quote tweet and say lies and be done with it. All of this led President Trump arriving at the determination that this military operation was necessary. The commander-in-chief determines what does and does not constitute a threat. Can I just say, the fact that they keep repeating that is scary to me, because they keep saying, oh, constitute a threat. He gets to determine. He determines. Remember, he says if it's a threat or not. He does it. He is the one who figures out if it's a threat. If that's the case, then if the president of the United States determined that there was a threat from Russia, could he not bomb the Kremlin tomorrow? I'm not saying that he should. I'm just saying, does the president have the power to bomb any country's capital at any point based on his possibly superfluous determination that an imminent attack was likely with no review? Because if it becomes, oh, well, they might have gotten atomic weapons down the line, so it was like an imminent threat. Or, oh, they were preparing for the possibility of striking back if we were to attack them, so we have to strike them first, so that's an imminent threat. That's not an imminent threat. That's a country building up its military capabilities. If that's true, that could become an imminent threat if it's used as an imminent threat, but that's also a country arming itself. That doesn't constitute an imminent threat that the president could say, okay, we have to strike now with no consultation to allies or Congress. But the fact that they keep saying, remember, guys, he determines, he's the one who figures it out, he determines if it's an imminent threat, that suggests to me that they're going to try to really heavily lean on the fact that at the end of the day, Congress doesn't have a say. The president is the one who alone gets to determine if there's a threat or not, and therefore determines if we're going to be bombing a country or not when I wake up. All of this led to President Trump arriving at the determination that this military operation was necessary for U.S. national security.
Black-pilled Kiwi has donated $5. This honestly sounds like the current administration was considering U.S. forces in the region getting hit as extensions of threat to the USA. Very Kremlin-coded.
Well, I mean, if the idea is American forces were going to get hit and they knew they were going to get hit and they had to respond in some way to be preparatory to that, at least that would have more justification. But that hasn't been shown to the public at all either. If we were just going to hear that Iran was going to do a random ballistic missile launch against an American base in Syria, then that would at least have more justification. But that has not been shown. That was not posted. That was not shown around. No. So I don't even know if that's true. But I mean, the way they keep leaning into they determine if it's a threat, it's only the president. The more I hear it, the more I'm like, well, that sounds like the president just can at any point bomb anyone as long as he says, oh, there was a threat, don't worry. I mean, it's not that I would like that. That's what it sounds like. Reminds me of that animation I saw yesterday, actually. Well, let me pull this out, actually. Do I have that animation still? Do I have it saved? Come on, I must have it somewhere. Could have swore I save it. Here it is.
I have never been a quitter. Once upon a time, an imperial president was cast out of the palace.
The nation must always come before any person.
But all the president's men refused to relinquish the throne's power.
I must put the interests of America first.
So they went to work rewiring the government. They didn't just take back the controls. They began building something new, something stronger. They gave the president the power to go around Congress to launch unauthorized wars. They ignored the law and cut secret arms deals.
The Pentagon says millions of dollars worth of weapons were turned over to the CIA for shipment to Iran.
They manufactured vast new executive powers for a war on terror.
I would characterize Guantanamo Bay as the least worst place we could have selected.
The Obama administration's continuing a Bush-era policy authorizing the killing of U.S. citizens abroad.
The goal of this master plan was to create an all-powerful president, or as some called it, the unitary executive.
You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said no, other than day one.
So when a man longing to be a king took the throne, he inherited unprecedented powers to get his way. And those powers are now turning our world upside down. Welcome to Master Plan Season 2, The Kingmakers.
I just wanted to show that because I really like the animation style. That's really the only reason. I really like the animation style. Looks cool as fuck. I was thinking about contacting that cartoonist and actually hiring them for something. But I have no clue if it would be in budget. Maybe. Who knows? Who knows? Oh, did you see Dan Bonagino responding to this, by the way? The other man who dropped because public politics was too hard. Do we have that? 1 second. Where's that one Dan Bonagino clip? I just want to show you guys. Nope, that is not that Dan Bonagino clip. That is not the Dan Bonagino clip. Here's the Dan Bonagino clip. I just want to remember what Dan Bonagino is all about. I just want to remember what he's all about.
This is Karate Man. Double leg. The jump kick. The side kick. The roundhouse. The tie kick. Body.
So I would say this is a very brave man. Here is him talking about Joe Kent's post and the access to information he had and how it's obvious that there was an imminent threat. And this is open source, even though the presidency continues to discuss it in extremely vague terms. They won't say exactly what the imminent threat is. Somehow that vague, nondescript threat is open source already.
You're going to see this with Joe Kent in the coming days. Listen, Joe's decorated history of service is beyond reproach, and his sacrifice with his family is just unspeakable. I don't even like to think about it.
His wife, who passed, who was killed.
Yeah, I mean, her name is emblazoned on a plaque in a facility I can't really talk about, and when you read the story there, it's a tough story to read. But, again, as I've said with other...
Longballs gifted 5 Tier 1 subscriptions. Bongino is only concerned with clout and how much he can farm.
No. He's also very concerned with ad deals. How much supplements can be sold. You don't be so one-dimensional with people. You really need... People bring a lot more value than you a lot of times give them credit for in life. God, what a guy. I'm trying to see. Do I have any more clips of him? I'm sorry. He's such a funny character. I don't think I have any more. No, I don't. Damn.
Tough story to read. But, again, as I've said with other... the sacrifice is beyond reproach. That doesn't mean that this current opinion is any more fact-based, because it's not. I'm really sorry, Laura. I mean,
I read probably a lot more intelligence than he did because they don't have a law enforcement function, the National Counterterrorism Center. They're an analytical clearinghouse. They're valuable. However, I had access.
Okay, to be clear, he works under Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is the DNI head, the head of the Department of National Intelligence. Her job is to prepare the president's everyday presidential daily brief, to let him know what threats the country do and do not face. So when he says, oh, they're just analytical. Yeah, what they do is they take data from all of these different intelligence agencies, from the Central Intelligence Agency to the FBI, to whatever they can gather to try to give the president a breakdown of the different threats that the country faces. If anything, somebody in this organization should know more than somebody in the Central Intelligence Agency, the FBI, or just one part of the Department of Homeland Security, because this is supposed to be the funnel by which all that data is channeled and then given to the President of the United States. And so to dumb down that position to merely analytical ignores exactly what the role should be. I already didn't like Tulsi Gabbard having the role because I think somebody who would always want to turn a blind eye to Russian aggression towards the United States, towards Europe, and believes Russian propaganda for why Ukraine was invaded, I don't think that is the best person who can determine what information is good and what information is full of horse shit. I don't think she's very good at that because she hasn't been able to do that in the public with the information that we all have access to, let alone classified data that could end up God knows where. Thankfully, from what I know, she hasn't had too much impact on actual decision making. Thank goodness. But that does not mean that she hasn't had no impact or that she's not preparing bad presidential daily briefs that could ignore real threats to the country. And when you hear things like from Trump, when you hear things from Trump, like nobody told me that they were going to attack the Strait of Hormuz, and, nobody told me they were going to attack all these other states. When I hear this type of rhetoric, I wonder, is she doing her job well? So again, analytical is dumbing it down, but I mean, Tulsi Gabbard's performance in the role leaves much to be desired.
Counterterrorism Center. They're an analytical clearinghouse. They're valuable. However, I had access to just about everything. And how you could come to the conclusion that the Israelis did it and there was no imminent threat here? Really? What about the anti-ship ballistic missiles, the drone program, 440 kilograms of 60% enriched nuclear material? There's
no imminent threat. That right there, look, he's not in government right now anymore, so I really shouldn't be using him as a justification. But if you're asked, oh, there's really no imminent threat, they have drones. What? The Russians have drones. Should we blow up the Russians tomorrow? That doesn't mean that they have an imminent threat to the American homeland. That we're going to see fucking Iranian drones flying over Prince George's County out of D.C. or we're going to be bombing Florida. The fact that they have drones, the fact they have a ballistic missile program, the fact they have the IRGC, all of these things are true of this presidency, Trump's first term, Obama's time in office, Biden's times in office, Bush's times in office, and the presidents before him. Does that mean any of those presidents at any time could have started a war with Iran with no congressional oversight? If they just made the determination, ooh, those missiles are kind of scary. Guess we're at war now. Don't need to ask anybody. We're at war now. American soldiers will die, but it's a sacrifice that we're willing to make with no oversight. No, if he said, from the information I saw, it was clear that the Iranians were trying to plan something in the next year. That sounds like an imminent threat, not, oh, they have a drone program. Yeah, they've had a drone program. I think the last over 4 years in Russia and Ukrainian relations have made very clear that the Iranians have a drone program. My God, to say, well, come on, they have drones. They have an atomic weapons program. Of course, they're imminent threat. Those drones cannot reach America. Those drones can reach bases in the Middle East. And if they were an imminent threat because of those drones, because of those weapons that apparently Dan Bonagino has determined, why was it that the American bases that faced that drone threat didn't have air defense systems to protect them? Why was it that American service members in Syria, in the southern Syrian base, the one base we still have in Syria, while we're rotating troops, we're rotating equipment to that base, they didn't have an air defense system till fucking 5 days ago? And 2 weeks into the goddamn war, they didn't have a fucking air defense system. If they decided to throw a missile at it, if they decided to throw a drone at it, you know what those boys in that base would have had to do? Kiss their ass goodbye or hide. If you don't hide, good luck. That shouldn't be the strategy for our soldiers in the region if the main priority is the imminent threat. If that's what you're paying attention to, this imminent threat, why were our bases not ready for that imminent threat of the drones that he's discussing? Why is it that we had to first brush off our allies as if they were unimportant? Oh my God, you want to come in once the job's all done, then turn around, say, never mind, please do actually help us in the Strait of Hormuz, at the same time that we call their navies rust buckets. Point is, if we were doing this because of this imminent threat, why didn't we act like there was an imminent threat? Definitely when the reporting seems to indicate that the Israelis were going to engage in a campaign, it seems like we just tagged along with them.
Conclusion that the Israelis did it and there was no imminent threat here? Really? What about the anti-ship ballistic missiles, the drone program, 440 kill?
To be clear, China has an anti-ship ballistic missile program. They also have a drone program. Can we bomb Beijing tomorrow? Can the President of the United States, with no consultation with Congress, drop a bomb on Beijing? Does that seem sensible? Does that seem like a stable system that will stand the test of time while we have atomic weapons in this country, where there will be actual consequences as the results of our actions? I'm not saying Trump will do that, but should he have the power to?
Kilograms of 60% enriched nuclear material, their constant death to America chance. I mean, you know, that's called evidence. In some limited circles, we call that, you know, a clue. I mean, I don't know at what point you thought this wasn't an imminent threat after you've read a lot of the stuff I read. And by the way, that's just the open source stuff we can talk about on the air. I promise you, the president, I promise you, has a bevy of material that if he could do the Men in Black thing and erase your mind tomorrow, if he told you right now, you would come to the imminent threat conclusion in a snap.
So you hear it's all the weapons that we already knew Iran had. That was the imminent threat, and a bunch of other stuff that's like a CIA movie, and like if I was Will Smith and you were like a Men in Black recruit, I could wipe your mind. Why is it they always go to the fucking movies? It's always the Marvel or like something. Okay, why is the entire messaging strategy just pop culture trash? Men in Black is fine. Men in Black in reference to this war makes no sense. But again, it's just being used to distract from the fact that they have yet to make clear to the American public what threat we're fucking fighting against. What are these soldiers dying for? He didn't have a conversation with the American public before the war, and he's barely having a conversation with the American public after the war. If he's asked, like, hey, why are sailors being sent to the region? Oh my God, you're obnoxious. The way he engages with the media makes it so people aren't able to get a good grip of what's going on. The way he engages in rallies means we're not getting a good grip on what's going on. He's very, very untransparent, so he can't really peer into what's going on with the operations. And the goals are all over the place and non-consistent.
Longballs has donated $5. As a boomer who was in high school during 9/11, just know that when they start talking about WMDs, it means that it's all bullshit.
I don't think it's even like weapons of mass destruction. I know the Iranian government wants atomic weapons. Weapons of mass destruction are real things, but they're not even at that level. They're not talking. They're just saying imminent threat. They have drones. You know, they have missiles. Yeah. I'm sure North Korea will have drones and missiles. Like all tons of countries have these things. That doesn't mean that's an imminent threat to the United States. They're overreaching their power, but they're trying to fall back on the idea that, well, America has a system where the president determines that. So ultimately, even if we were or were not under imminent threat, if he calls it imminent threat, then it is imminent threat. Okay, we got some other stories here I wanted to go through quickly. We got some Ukraine stories and such. I was told that I should have more times between segments to talk to people. So anybody have any questions before we go on to the next segment? Oh, by the way, airline ticket prices are skyrocketing right now. That has not been fun.
I don't suppose, Don.
What should I have for dinner? Fish. You put the Guardian article about the NSA Jonathan Powell on good proposal by Iran rejected by Witkoff and Kushner. Okay. You put it in what section? Breaking news Discord tab. I will check it out after. Just FYI, Sharon was prime minister when the U.S. invaded Iraq and warned them not to do it. Bibi wanted them to, but he wasn't PM, so That is true, actually. I remember that there was a divide about it in Israeli society. I didn't remember where the divide lined. I just remember watching footage of Netanyahu fucking banging on for the war. I knew that there was somebody in Israel that didn't like it. Not somebody in Israel. There were forces in Israel that didn't like it. I know that Israel didn't participate in the invasion directly, just that it was a controversial issue in Israel and whether or not it was a good idea. And then Netanyahu, which is now, of course, the prime minister, was supportive of it at the time. But yes, that is true. That the active prime minister at the time, before Netanyahu, the longest running prime minister in Israeli history, did not support it. But Netanyahu, of course, did. Fish is good. I thought fish was a good pick. I thought fish was a fantastic pick.
I don't suppose Donald Trump reads Moskovsky Komsomolets over his morning coffee, but if he did, he wouldn't like this. The headline today, Iran has got Trump by the throat.
We already watched this yesterday. I just wanted to hear that again. Iran's got Trump by the throat. Okay. Few articles I wanted to read through. This one has to do with the Middle East, so we'll start with this one. There are over 200 Ukrainians that are now in the Middle East helping Gulf states and the people of the region defend against Iranian Shahed kamikaze drone attacks. There is no country on earth that is more experienced in taking out Iranian base design drones than the Ukrainian armed forces. None. What kind of fish? Fucking salmon. Did it matter which type of fish? I'll tell you catfish. You get me angry. I'll say puffer fish. Throw a dice roll into it. But anyway, I know that experience is useful. I knew that they wanted that help. We saw the reports clearly indicating that Saudi Aramco and all these different companies wanted Ukrainian air defense teams, anti-Shahed teams working to defend their properties, working to defend their countries, because the desalination plants are needed for society to run. The oil and gas drilling wells and refineries are needed for the economy to function. And so those properties, if damaged, could not only send the region into a water crisis, but also send the world into a deeper energy crisis. And so Gulf states, as well as different companies, have been working with the Ukrainians to defend these locations with anti-drone drones. I did not think it was over 200 people. I thought it would be maybe a couple dozen. This is much more than I expected. This means that there's dozens of Ukrainians in each country operating these systems, teaching the locals about how to, fight against these drones, and offering more anti-drone experience than any American advisor could ever dream to. Somehow, the Ukrainians are providing more air defense cover than any other American ally in the entire world for America's, we'll just call them friends, colleagues maybe is better, in the Middle East. Again, I thought it would be like 12, 20 people. I did not think that they would. I mean, this is enough people to run a lot of drone teams back in Ukraine. I mean, 200 people in a city can help defend that city against Shahed attacks. And the Russians throw more Shahed attacks against Ukraine every day than the Iranians throw Shahed attacks against the entirety of the Middle East. So it's not like they don't need them, but they're sending that support anyway. And at the same time the support is being sent, the Trump administration takes offense at that support being sent. Crazy times we live in. Where we were told for so long, Ukraine needs to pay us back. Ukraine's like, here you go. And then the response is, fuck you, that's insulting. Okay. Do they think you get extra points if you complete a military campaign by yourself? Is that how that works? Did you see one of the craziest videos out of the war yet? First real footage I've seen of the Fatah 2 with hypersonic glide vehicles. Actually shows maneuverability. Does any other country have something like this advanced? Don't think Russia or America do. Maybe China? Probably. Plus, also the idea that it's like, I'm reading this, it makes it practically immune to model air defense. Yeah, give fucking fuck off. No, it's like, it's advanced. It's advanced. It's just, it's interceptable. I mean, if the fact that my eyes could follow it means it's interceptable. Hold on. Do you believe that homosexuality is okay to Islam? Fixation in UK. What the fuck did that have to do with? Is that a question for me, or is that a question for somebody else? I don't think most Abrahamic religions has a good relationship with RuPaul's Drag Race as we currently stand, but it depends on the church. Less mosques, though. Anyway, this is wild. This is a lot more drone pilots and operators than I expected. And this is really probably a massive help to send those many people over there to do this work. This is probably more substantial than many help sent by essentially every other American ally. If the French end up sending like half their navy like they said they will, maybe that'll change. But I mean, these are over 200 men who have put themselves in harm's way to do this. In a war away from their homes where the only end result once the fighting is over is to come back home to another war. Also, the Russians are intensifying military recruitment of occupied territory. There's not many Ukrainians in occupied territory to recruit at this point anyway. They've really kind of drained the resources of those in the occupied territories, especially when it comes to military recruitment. So it's kind of surprising to me that they think that there's really much to drag from it at this point. But I do want to throw out there that every single Russian soldier signs up for what they're doing. Every single one, whether it's from prison recruitment, whether it's from just normal contract signings, or the one exception is Ukrainians being forced to fight in occupied territory. Those are the only people who have no choice on whether they join the fight against their country, are Ukrainians. So Abraham condones slicing heads. So are Russians or IRGC hating homosexuals? Also, I like it that he wrote like homosexual. I don't know if that was on purpose, but homosexuals, that's what I am, by the way. I'm not homosexual, I'm homosexual. Is like ISIS. Why are we talking about homosexuality in Islam in chat right now? Or really any religion? But I don't want to. I don't want to. It's not worth it. Twitch chat, undefeated. I can't help but feel somewhat angry at Zelensky for going to such lengths to help Trump when the reality is that he's going to get zero appreciation, none whatsoever. It's so unfair, man. Well, I mean, I remember reading some people like saying, well, what Ukraine should do is pivot to China. And I'm just like, these people do not care to learn. They do not care to care. That is never going to happen. You're not going to be able to separate the Russians and the Chinese. There are fools in the Trump administration, real fools who have Trump's ear, who thinks that we can use the peace deal in Ukraine to separate the Chinese and the Russians. It will never happen. Never. Not during the Trump administration, not during any of these administration. Sorry, boys, I shouldn't talk drunk. Enough is enough. Fair. Okay, get it. Have a good one. Also, I do want to say for the record, Abraham didn't endorse head slicing homosexuals. The Bible does endorse stoning them to death. Personally, I'd rather have my head chopped off. If I had to choose, I think that would be slightly faster. Wouldn't it be hilarious, though, if China did pivot to Ukraine? Yeah, but it's not. They have no motivation to. They have no motivation to. The Russians provide them cheap energy. The Russians are like historical axes by which they can resist the United States. The Russians are more consistently anti-American, which is more of a geopolitical rival for them than for Ukrainians. It's not that, like, on principle, if China really believes in the anti-imperialism that they always fucking talk on and on about, then yeah, of course they should support the Ukrainians, and they shouldn't be selling drone parts to the Russians to help invade the Ukrainians, or helping the Russian war machine profit to help bomb the Ukrainians. But we all know that's a bunch of horse hockey, right? So, geopolitics, states represent themselves. Yeah, but Muslims, it's okay. Night. You know what? That's a good point. My official position is that you can only execute me for my homosexual lifestyle. If you are an Islamic extremist. If you are a Christian extremist, I will call you a racist. If you are Muslim extremist, I of course will welcome you into my home with open arms, and I will hand you my my sharpest blade. A whimsical fairy dream. Okay. Ukraine forms working group to prepare for reopening of airports. I heard something similar about this back in 2023. Nothing ever happened. I would like for Boryspil International Airport to open. It would make my life so much easier. I could just go straight to Ukraine, straight back, straight to Ukraine, straight back. I wouldn't have to get off into no fucking goddamn bus. I wouldn't have to get into no border crossing at the border. That's going to take hours and hours and hours and hours as we fucking sit in this bus, wait for them to go through all of their fucking passports and go with the drug dogs and do the whole bullshit. Fuck that. My God, please. Let me just fly into the city. Let me just fly just straight into, please, Lord. But I don't think it's going to be happening anytime soon. The Ministry for Development of Communities and Territories, because I mean, like, I hear the want and the desire for this, but if you can't prevent the Russians from missile striking the airport, then what's going to stop them? The Ministry for Development of Communities and Territories of Ukraine has established a specialized working group to prepare for the resumption of the country's airport operations. The official order was signed by Oleksiy Kubila, the Deputy Prime Minister for Restoration and Minister of Community and Territories Development. Ukraine civil aviation has been completely grounded and its airspace closed to all commercial flights since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Ukraine civil aviation has been completely grounded. Oh, I already said that. The group functions as a consultative advisory board. The primary goal of the working group is to develop specific proposals for the resumption of civil aviation while ensuring the safety of critical aviation infrastructure. Members will meet both in person and online to draft recommendations for ministry regarding the protection of civil aviation assets and the restart of airport activities. Yeah, this is interesting. But I mean, I think it will, honestly, I think it will only happen once the war is over or we have a long freezing of it, ceasefire, before it restarts once the Russians, keep being the Russians. I just don't see it as practical otherwise. There's too many risks involved. Ukraine accepts EU offer to help restore Druzhba oil pipeline flow to Hungary and Slovakia. So, for the last month or so, after the Russians blew up an oil pipeline that supplied Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia through Ukraine, the Hungarians have been demanding that the Ukrainians pay to fix it. Now, they've already paid to fix it once, but then the Russians blew it up again. And now the Hungarians have once again demanded the Ukrainians pay to fix it again, or Ukraine is engaged in an energy blockade of Hungary. Mind you, the fuel that is sold to Hungary and Slovakia goes back into the Russian war machine and then is used to build drones and bombs that are then used against Ukraine. So the Ukrainian government would be at full moral right to say, screw you, we're not reopening it, or on the first day of the war, blowing up every single one of those pipelines for their own national security interests. It makes sense to me, especially if the pipeline, again, travels directly through Ukrainian territory. We're talking about using Ukrainian territory, Ukrainian infrastructure, Ukrainian airspace to transport fuel to the Hungarians and the Slovaks while the Russians are invading Ukraine. And this has gone on for over 4 years. The Hungarians and the Slovaks have had over 4 years to turn to other sourcing alternatives for their fuel, and they have simply chose not to. Even though there are some countries like Czechia that are currently getting cheaper fuel from other sources, the contracts originate and fall to who? People that are close to the Hungarian government of Viktor Orban, meaning that those around Viktor Orban can enrich themselves, helping Hungary to be the most corrupt country in the European Union 4 years running. Can we get a round of applause for Hungary in the chat? Thank God they've won something. The response by the Ukrainians to this request to rebuild it was a no. We will not rebuild it. After they said no, the Hungarians said, we will respond and open it with force. This then got a vitriolic response from Zelensky, where he basically said, we know where your addy is. We know where you live, bro. And then after that, the Hungarians then seized tens of millions of dollars worth of Ukrainian money and gold that was being transferred from financial institutions to help manage the Ukrainian economy and Ukrainian financial sector. Was this a legal transfer? Absolutely. Was it pretty routine given the circumstances of the war? Absolutely. Did the Hungarians have any legal basis to seize the gold and money? Not at all. Did they detain 7 Ukrainian bank employees at gunpoint, making it look like to Europe that they're holding them hostage? Yes, they were then let go within 36 hours, but still, they were illegally detained and then removed from the country, gold and money not to be seen again. The Hungarian government, seemingly finally showing what their force was, then said that the Ukrainians had to reopen the passageway of fuel or they're not going to get the gold and money. At the same time, they're claiming that the gold and money is a big Ukrainian corruption scheme, but they're only claiming it with question marks like, what is all this gold? What is all this money? As if it was just endless vague posting. And you all know how I feel about vague posters. And so after some time, the Ukrainian government was not going to do the repairs. They don't have the budget. And right now, they're sitting with waiting for the European aid package of over $103 billion to pass through and get to them to help cover the 2026-2027 budgetary constraints that Ukraine is currently under. And it is Hungary who agreed to pass it and then held it up after holding this gold and money hostage and Ukrainian bankers hostage. So they held up the $103 billion after agreeing to let it through. They took 7 Ukrainian bankers and detained them. And they seized tens of millions of dollars in Ukrainian precious metal and dollars, hryvnias and such, during the transfer process. All, of course, illegally. In an attempt to pressure the Ukrainian government to back off the Druzhba pipeline, spend their own money to repair it, and help the Russians sell energy to the Hungarians and the Slovaks, the money of which will then be used to bomb and kill Ukrainians. The Europeans have decided to solve the issue. How? They'll cover the repairs. And then Hungary and Slovakia will be able to get their fuel and fund the war effort in peace. Thank you, Europe. Your bravery has once again inspired the world. Huzzah! You will cover the repairs for them to profit off of the Russian war machine. Huzzah! Problem solved, I guess. The Ukrainian bank people were let go by Hungary, after 36 hours. I know that. Okay. Let's go check out the 9th district. How's the race go? It's over. It's over. Daniel Biss, the mathematician, has won. Kat came up short by about 4,000 votes. He came in second, well within striking distance. Only 4 percentage points, a little over 4 percentage points, separates the two campaigns. Sucks for Kat. Did much better than many people gave her credit for being able to. But the race is over. Daniel wins. We'll see if he abandons his want to ban the Second Amendment. Look, trying to run as somebody who just moved to a community 2 years ago is always going to be met with some hostility. And honestly, I wonder if she was a native of the district, would she have won? The sound is simultaneously melodic, sad, and anxious. When we traveled to Zaporizhia, we visited the Tree of Memory, a 9-metal sound installation in honor of fallen Ukrainian defenders and women of Ukraine.
Цей звук, він, такий, він одночасно... Я просто бачив...
I'm gonna listen to it.
Я просто бачив...
This is a pretty neat memorial. Just kind of sit there and listen. She lost by the spoiler of the... she literally lost by the difference of the spoiler candidate. She should be on the hate list of any progressive, literally a genocide assistance candidate. I don't know if I'd call it a genocide assistance candidate, but I would say she's a spoiler. I don't think Daniel Biss is going to be the difference by which Israel does or does not commit a genocide. But I do think that if your priority was seeing AIPAC take a loss in this race, like that person who was the spoiler wanted to do was, fuck AIPAC, then yeah, you ended up just kind of helping AIPAC. I mean, AIPAC did fund her campaign to act as a spoiler for a reason. Either way, I choose to blame Mike from PA for this. Hey, no, he won't take any of the blame. He switched up and was supporting Kat as of like 3 days ago. Or 2 days ago. I don't know. Whenever Rashida Tlaib came out and endorsed her, and then it was no longer fashionable to be calling her a China war hawk. That's when. Did AOC ever endorse Kat? Nope. And look, if they would have endorsed her 2 weeks earlier, and we would have got the spoiler to drop out, she would have won. I can say those two things confidently. If we would have gotten the endorsements for her earlier, and we didn't wait until yesterday to drop those endorsements, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar was retweeting one of the spoiler candidates within a few hours of the fucking day of the election coming in, If they just would have had some more coordination beforehand and were able to talk to that candidate in private saying, let's do something to fight AIPAC, then they could have beaten AIPAC here. But if their left is good at anything, it is fighting each other and being as disorganized as physically goddamn possible. And so the natural qualities of the left has once more shined through. It's shunned through it all. Hassan put him in his place and he didn't change his mind before that. Did he? That's funny because Hassan was the one that who said that because she's a Palestinian, she should know better than supporting Taiwan, which is one of the wildest things I have ever heard somebody who called themselves a progressive say. And I'm not saying he isn't progressive, but that's not a progressive sentiment. But I guess, you know, when it came down to fucking AIPAC, all that was put to the side. We finally found out if they hate Israel or China more. The answer is Israel. I mean, if they love China or hate Israel more, and the answer was hate Israel. By the way, which is not a critique, by the way. I think they ultimately did the correct thing in endorsing Kat. Would have been nicer if it was earlier on when the polling data was already clear that she was the next best candidate with the best chance of swinging, and which was the case like weeks ago. That was clear, which is, again, when the progressive movement should have moved. A week before I posted my first video about Kat, saying she had the best chance to win, talking about her foreign policy positions, that is probably when she should have gotten endorsed. He had her on and supported her all the way. Sorry that you can have some criticisms of people. It's not all a cult, Keck W. Okay, a critique of her would be, I disagree with her position on China. Okay, if I was to critique Hassan, I would say, wow, you know, his Turkish, you know, roots would make me think that he would know better than to say that about the Kurds. Like, I mean, look, I'm not something a little, like, you could just judge people on their own accord. Especially when you're like trying to use it to leverage like her message of self-determination for both Palestinians and the Taiwanese, trying to leverage her identity against her supporting Taiwan. I just didn't think it was good. I think it's non-progressive. It did something about it, rubbed me the wrong way. It's good he supported her, but that was wild. It ultimately didn't end up mattering because it wasn't a main focus of his. It wasn't a main focus of the campaign. Nobody in fucking Illinois 9th was discussing whether, you know, her Taiwan policy was going to bring us to war. Yeah, her foreign policies are bad and she made up for that. She had a bad advisor at the beginning. No. No, she didn't. I mean, all the stuff that she was getting critiqued for, it seemed like was reasonable positions that she held. I mean, I don't like what position particularly. The only thing that was bad was the description as an interventionist, because I wouldn't describe her as like any sort of hardcore interventionist. That was the only thing that the advisor said, or like that I read from that letter, that gave me pause. Like, why would you be running in a progressive campaign and thinking like using that term would be smart? Freedom to Taiwan. You guys know nothing about Taiwan. Oh, okay. I got you. Because if you're saying her position changed, what did her position change to? Because as far as I'm aware, she still wanted to send weapons to Taiwan. She still wanted to support Taiwan. And she still left on the table the American Navy off the coast of Taiwan, stopping Chinese ships. So how did her position change? She said that publicly. She said that on progressive programs when asked to clarify her position. So, I mean, I gave her credit for having a better foreign policy on Taiwan than AOC because hers was more clear-cut. It was more, you know, it wasn't vague as her description was at the Munich Security Conference. You know, there was vagueness to it, but in comparison, relative to the competition in the progressive movement, it was better. And about her advisor, she got a new advisor. Yes, she said that on her podcast, got critiqued, and what happened after? Nothing happened after, because no one cared. Because the idea of like, oh my God, she's supportive of Taiwan. We got, oh, she's a war hawk with China. Nobody in the Democratic base cares. Nobody in the Democratic base cares. Nobody in the Democratic Party is like, oh my God, we're gonna give Taiwan a weapon. Nobody feels that way. It's a small group of largely party outsiders who are on the fringes of American politics, many of which don't participate in American politics through electoral systems to begin with. Right? So I don't think that had a major impact on her campaign to begin with, but I do think that the critique she got about it was unfair. Exactly. It was not a big deal, and Assad said the same. She got bad politics about Taiwan, but it doesn't matter for this election. No, it was, she's got bad politics about Taiwan. She should know better as a Palestinian, but it doesn't matter for this election. Okay. And that's also, by the way, every single person who was running probably supports Taiwan and Ukraine. It's just she was the only one that was actually out there to give a concise, somewhat descriptive answer. I hope the progressive movement moves closer to what she said on the campaign trail, what she espoused on the campaign trail. Get rid of some of the moral hollowness in our base. You take that out of the short clip, but ignore the rest. Yes, I focus on the gross thing that's said. If somebody said, Dylan, as a homosexual, you should know much better than to X, Y, or Z, I'm immediately taking offense to that. What do you mean? That's who I am? I'm just like that? And that's supposed to dictate my beliefs? Definitely when it showed like a complete lack of interest in understanding her position. Because Hassan can't defend his position on Taiwan. He couldn't defend his position on Ukraine. These are issues that break the minds of a lot of progressive people on this platform. Is because whether it's the aesthetics of it, whether it's that they've been like Mearsheimer brain melted, it's a problem. It's why when she went on like Breaking Points, the Breaking Points people were asking like the worst possible fucking questions. It's like there's a section of the American left that has had their brain melted by podcaster-itis, having a bunch of knuckle-dragging, window-licking morons trying to advise them on foreign policy. Like, oh, we could have ended the war in Ukraine if Boris Johnson just did an X, Y, and Z. Stuff that gets repeated and then doesn't get questioned and then gets turned into gospel, even though it's not true. Okay, some Ukrainian who are supporting Russia should not know better. Of course they should. That is the dumbest fucking comparison you could have made. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean, but Taiwan and Palestine are across oceans from each other. The issue that she has in both instances is the Palestinians should be able to dictate their own affairs, and the Taiwanese should be able to dictate their own affairs. And both the Taiwanese and Palestinian identities and their modern concept were created within the last 100 years. There's nothing wrong with having those identities, but the idea that those people should not be able to rule themselves because of what team one side or the other side is on is wrong. I think fundamentally, and this was her position, that self-determination dictates that both of these people should be able to run their own affairs. And it is only through alliances that countries like Taiwan could even continue to exist. And they're not the only country that can only continue to exist through alliances. Taiwan, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine. There's a bunch of countries that are like this. Because that's the sad reality of great power politics in our modern era. So she engaged with the issue seriously and was penalized by online freaks for it. Those freaks, many of which then ended up supporting her anyway. When I say freaks, I mostly mean Mike. I'm not going to call Hassan a freak. But Mike, yes.
Christianity united all those who were at the bottom. And it was so insidious, it spread so widely, spreading the idea of the equality of men and being judged by your actions and your beliefs. It was radically egalitarian. It didn't conquer. Ghost of Toller, thank you for the tier 1. Unless you're like, unless you're, one of the fucking horse meat eating slop fuckers of, Estonia or something. But other than Estonia, Christianity, for the most part, did not conquer. It was the, oh, you're pathetic and your life sucks? Well, God loves you. Hassan Orbiter's loving Stalin and being anti-Estonian and anti-bait racist, thinking that Stalin is the opposite of Hitler, who civilized the Baltic savages, that they keep your low your 50%. I mean, it is just objectively true that the Soviet Union raised you guys to sentience. It is true. I mean, like, weren't you still doing human sacrifices at that point?
Sorry, that's a goodie. That's a goodie. Dylan, that's not true. The Palestinians' identity is ancient. You can believe that. I mean, Ukrainian identity is ancient. Russian identity is ancient. American identity is ancient. Sure, okay. Every identity is ancient when we're all nationalists. Every identity is ancient. No, the Palestinian identity started to form as it's in its modern like conglomeration during like the late Ottoman period. It's pretty almost universally accepted consensus. Supporting and forcing Taiwan into a war with China would be the doom of Taiwan, and you're completely ignorant, naive if you don't see that. I'm sorry, dude. I mean, I'm trying not to be a fucking cunt, but I feel like I'm fucking doing like baby's first Taiwan conversation. Taiwan has existed as a separate entity from mainland China since the cessation of the Chinese Civil War. In that time, they have developed into a democracy. They chose not to become communist bird baseball like league. They didn't decide to go out, beat all the sparrows to death and do all that shit. They decided to go their own pathway. At first, it was really brutal with the white purges. Then Chiang Kai-shek kicks the bucket. He's fucking dead. And then they eventually reform into a democracy, a real liberal democracy, which they are today. When the people got a choice to vote, they voted. And the current power that is in place is not the Kuomintang. It is not the KMT. When you talk about like the little dictators who did the white purges, you want to know what their political party believes today? Let's go be friends with China. It is the opposition, the Democratic Progressive Party, that is much more considered, you know what, I'm much more leaning towards, we need to make sure we preserve our independence. That's their position. That's also the position of the vast majority of Taiwanese people. When given the opportunity to develop their own identity and culture, more Taiwanese people identified as Taiwanese today than they identify as Chinese. When you look at the young, up-and-coming Taiwanese people who have never known Beijing's type of rule, who have never known the restriction of civil liberties that was around during the White Purge period, that their fathers and grandfathers fought and struggled and died against. Not to just hand all that over for a restriction of civil liberties, a death to their constitutional republic, and an abandonment of everything they've worked towards to have a higher standard of living than exists on mainland China. And the only way that can be preserved, which is what the only way that can be preserved is a preservation of the status quo. That's the only way. The fucking dreams of a Declaration of Independence does not seem to be in the cards right now, and reunification is something that they do not want. So the status quo is the way to go, which is also what the majority of Taiwanese people want. And instead of talking about what the majority of the locals want, progressives seem much more comfortable, at least this small percentage of like 1/10 of progressives seem much more comfortable abandoning 25 million people progressively to uncertainty in their future, uncertainty when it comes to them possibly being invaded, a war. The reason why the Chinese don't invade Taiwan is they don't know that it would succeed, and Taiwan has American support. So what's wrong with maintaining that status quo that has avoided a war against one of the most densely populated countries on the planet if you exclude mountainous regions, which is true of Taiwan? If there was to be a bombing campaign in Taipei, if there was to be a bombing campaign along the shorelines where the majority of Taiwanese people are, the casualty count would be disastrous. Which is all why Taiwan needs the means to protect itself and prevent even the dream of an invasion of the island, which is why Cat supported aid to the island to at least disincentivize an attack. One must defend themselves if they don't want to have to go to war. And like the idea of America pushes them into a war with China, it's the Taiwanese requesting these weapons deals. You know, when it's a weapons deal, that means we sell them stuff, right? That means they have to buy it. That means they came to us with money and they want to buy weapons from us. If they want to buy weapons from us, that means they're asking for the weapons from their democratically elected government. So this idea, we're pushing war onto them by selling them weapons, sometimes not because we're scared of how China will react, is what, oh, that's we're pushing them a war. If that's the case, then that's their decision, that they care enough about their sovereignty, their independence, their way to manage their own affairs, that they're willing to accept the risk that comes with weapons deals, which avoids a different risk of being unarmed against one of the most powerful countries on the planet, the most populous country on the planet, which is led by a massive revanchist. If the Taiwanese people want to go be part of China and they want to, and they saw what happened in Hong Kong and they said that's for them, then that's their decision. That's not what they've decided. Not to mention, when we talk about the Taiwan's Relations Act, supporting Taiwan is current U.S. law. Like, it is current U.S. law in the Taiwan's Relations Act that it is an American security priority to make sure that Taiwan has the means to at least prevent a Chinese invasion. So when we say, oh my gosh, this is like warmonger, this has been the way that it has worked for decades. This is not particularly scary. This is not particularly like different, besides the fact that the Chinese have now expanded their naval fleet and their means are expanding. So we're pushing them to war. We're doing the same thing we've done for decades. We're doing the same thing that we've done for as far as I have been alive, and double that. Been nearly fucking 50 years. You'd nearly have to double my age in order to get when the Taiwan's Relations Act was passed. But you Americans make it sound like China is about to invade Taiwan anytime now. But it's only you fucking Americans and goddamn Russians who are invading others. China invades other countries. They invaded Vietnam. They also have tons of border skirmishes with the Indians, and they're trying to take territory from Brunei, the Philippines, Vietnam still, Japan, I think Indonesia. Like, there's a bunch of countries they have territorial disputes with. The only country they threaten war over it with is Taiwan, because they want all of it. And they say straight up, you will either come back to us or you will come back to us. What is that supposed to mean? If I have a gun in my pocket and I say, you give me your money or I'm going to take it, that's a threat. So it's not like China is just wistfully floating around like, oh, Taiwan, would you like to be friends? No, we have made a deal with the great Satan, America, Uncle Sam. Look, I'm not saying that we've always been fucking upright and moral in all of our dealings with China, but the idea that Taiwan just keeps coming back to us because they want to have a fight with China, keep getting our support. They're coming back to us because they know that without us, the amount of leverage they have is not great. What? You can't even compare what China did in Vietnam to what America did? Oh, so therefore it's good. I just want to hear that. When China invaded Vietnam, that's great, that's good, that's fantastic. China doesn't invade people like America. What? They do invade people. Well, no, but they invaded them like in a better way. Yeah, of course it was different. The context of the war was different. We tried to take over the fucking French mission. They invaded the country after we left. They said, oh, look, Vietnam's gone through decades and decades of civil strife and struggle. Let's add a little. I'm sorry, like China has the ability to invade its neighbors. They just don't have power projection as far as we do, but they have the ability to invade their neighbors. I never said it was good, then don't make an excuse for it. Don't say, but you're like, oh, China moves ships around, and that's the same as America fucking South America, the Middle East, and half of Asia. You know what? I would go as far to say that when Xi Jinping farts, it's just as bad as slavery. What the fuck's wrong with you? I didn't say any of those things. Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, that's like everything I said, except for that's nothing I said. I didn't say they're all the same amount of evil or all the same amount of bad. All I said is that if the Taiwanese are going to get conquered and have all of the things that they've built destroyed, whether it has to do with their republic, their civil society, the institutions, or the higher standard of living, or the identity they've built, then they have a right to engage in diplomacy, which is what they're doing with the United States, to defend themselves. That's my position. I didn't say that China's just as bad as the Contras or the fucking this or the fucking that. This is what it is. There's a section of the left that feels bad to do anything on the foreign affairs. There's a part of them that just like, if you ever take an action that seems somewhat aggressive, the aesthetics of it doesn't feel very Burning Man. It doesn't feel fucking peace and love. That's not something Jimi Hendrix would have said when fucking going off on the guitar. Nah, man, that ain't chill. Sorry. Sometimes you have to, if a country's threatening to invade you, you might have to arm yourself. That happens. All I see is typical American fear-mongering, when in reality, it's America who does all these things. If America was to disappear tomorrow, and me and everyone I've ever loved and ever known and every American that's ever existed was to evaporate into nothing, the Chinese would immediately invade Taiwan. The Russians would celebrate by seeing if they could expand their operations to Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The world would keep on turning, and the world would keep on being as brutal and as mean and as fucking vicious as it is right now. We're mean and we're vicious, but I don't know how any of this is a response as to how we stop the largest war in the Pacific from occurring since the Second World War or Vietnam. Which is what, if we had America and China, it would be the biggest war since, I guess, Korea. Korea is the only one it'd be Korea. It is always the people who decide what they want. If it's the people of Taiwan who don't want to be part of China, then they shouldn't be part of China. Great. We're back to my position as what I said at the start. As that is the fucking Taiwanese position. It is to keep the status quo. It is to defend themselves, but not provoke a war. They want trade with China, but they don't want to be part of China. That's been their position. That is their position. That's the results of the democratic elections that they've had, and it's also the result of public polling. And it's been the result of a bunch of diverse sets of public polling. So I'm happy we've come to a conclusion. I feel like I just got out of therapy. We're the world police. Amazing. Even so many leftists got that mindset in America. I didn't know Taiwan's not the world. Taiwan's Taiwan. I didn't say that I wanted to enforce the law in Mongolia. I said I wanted to sell weapons to Taiwan. You should bring that guy to argue with you for content. I don't do that anymore. I mean, I'm fine talking to anybody, but I don't like get on the stream. It's just not fucking worth it, man. Because if you think that anything different that's being said in chat is going to be said in voice, it isn't. It's going to be the same conversation. Yes, but all this started with the critique of Cat's foreign politics. The simply just arming people like crazy doesn't world all of these things. Like, okay, you talked so much about this clip. Can we see it and not just a 10-second clip? Her only position was sell them weapons. That's what Hassan doesn't like. That's what Mike doesn't like. They want them disarmed. That's their position. It's not a position of, oh, well, you know, do you want to give them some weapons, a lot of weapons? They don't want to give them any. No weapons. 0 weapons is their position. 0. Tell me one time you have ever heard Hassan Piker say it's a good thing to sell Taiwan shit. Because that's not his position. He views it as all provocative towards China. That's his main concern. And I'm fine provoking China if it's for something worthwhile. I don't want to. I'd like to generally avoid it. I would like to trade with China. I'd like to work with China on things like climate change. But I'm not going to compromise moral values and turn this country into not a country, but a mercenary company that will sell out our allies at the drop of the hat because we get a little fucking limp in the wrist. I don't want that. That doesn't seem like a strong progressivism. That's the type of weak progressivism that people despise the Democratic Party for having the image of. That we don't stand for anything. That will just flip and flop depending how the poll goes this way or the poll goes that way. Not only domestically, but this applies on an international context as well. You got to stand for something. For something, right? All we got here is Dylan reporting from Fox News. Let's give them all the weapons. Fuck yeah, more weapons to everybody who combats our enemy. Okay, now I am going to say get in the chat or get the fuck out of here. Now I am going to say get in the chat or get the fuck out of here because that's ridiculous. Go. That's my position. My position is give Taiwan every weapon. That I didn't know that. Because as far as I remember, I described in detail what my position was. It's called the porcupine strategy. It's one of many discussed positions for like what a defensive strategy in Taiwan would be. My position is give them mass, cheap weapons so that if there's anything that could touch the shores of Taiwan, it would be swarmed. Something that would really only be useful in a capacity where if they're getting invaded, they could sink it. We don't have weapons to give Taiwan. We do, but we do. It's just a choice about priorities, really. You're coming along to the Hassan theory, nukes for anybody who wants nation building. Let's just give Taiwan nukes. I agree with that. Okay, well, I would like to have children who reach their elderly years. So I am a supporter of nuclear non-proliferation. I don't know how I don't know how you hold the position. Giving fucking Taiwan drones is too provocative. You're just a warmonger. You sound like Fox. But giving them an atomic bomb is okay. Okay. That was a nice conversation. I think it's done now. Chat, let this be for the record. Defend Taiwan like you're a fucking rat bastard. I got Trump derangements. I do. I have Trump derangement syndrome because I hate that bastard, right? That's why I have Trump derangement syndrome, right? I want that same passion when you hear somebody so willing to sell out 25 million people while not even thinking about what the fuck they're saying. doing it for aesthetics, not for the rights of anyone. I want the same rage looking at those people. I really do mean that. Because if you think the amount of deaths and casualties in the last year of the Trump administration has been horrendous, and it has been, not being able to take a stand can lead to a lot more deaths in certain key places in the world on key issues. Taiwan's one of them. Ukraine's another. Now, by the way, I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I have critical Trump derangement syndrome. I have a critical
is a curd.
vile case.
This dono makes vatniks, tankies, and maggots mad.
If Taiwan had nukes, then you could be damn sure China would not invade Taiwan. Okay, but the problem would be getting nukes on Taiwan. You're going to create a Cuban Missile-style crisis. I'm not necessarily against Taiwan having a nuke or two, but number one, it goes against my general principle of nuclear nonproliferation and wanting to make less likely that we nuke everybody, not more likely that we nuke everybody. And if you actually fail to get it there, what's China's response going to be to hearing that the United States just tried to smuggle an atomic bomb onto an island in the South China Sea? It's going to be, let's go to war. And I want to avoid a war, despite what you might think of me. If you had to leave one and you had to choose Ukraine or Taiwan, what would you do? I would leave you. You would be the one I would leave. I would leave you running down your mother's leg. That's what I would do. And I would save both. Fuck you. Man, it's 11:30 a.m. 11:30 p.m. This is Dylan Burns' late night hours. I'm told I should read chat more. Do you guys know why I don't read chat more? This is why I don't read chat more. Let me look at YouTube for a second and cite chat. I gotta look away from Twitch chat. I'm a fucking aneurysm. Dylan Sawi. It says possible ban evader. You're not fucking sorry. It says possible ban evader on that account. Not sorry for shit. Fuck out of here. It's 4:30 here in Denmark and wonder why I don't go on Discord to yell up Keck W. You're Danish? I don't know. That actually hurt a little here finding out that guy was Danish. I like the Danes. Dylan selective tweet. Yeah, I read the thing that makes me angry. That's exactly. Why does that hurt exactly? I don't know. Cause I don't want to say that. I like the Danes. Okay, you have a beautiful country. This donut makes Vatniks, tankies, and magnets sad. Thank you for the $5. Thank you, Ohms, for the $10. Appreciate that in 24 months. Hi, Dylan. Hi, YouTube chat. Dylan Burns After Dark. It feels like it. Dylan got the only base foreign policy in our community. I try. Dylan, get one of those old school game show mics that are all skinny. I would actually like that shit. That actually sounds much more fun than holding this. Maybe I will get one of those, but I have to get one that's like good, and then I'd have to get another Shure microphone for recording for documentaries anyway. Do you think I don't support Ukraine? Is that what you seriously think? No, I don't think that. I just don't know how you would be okay with sending weapons to Ukraine, but not to Taiwan, while China is threatening to invade Taiwan, and they're trying to actively gain the means to do so. And the only way you can prevent them from gaining the means to do so is to give them weapons that would make it basically impossible or too much of a risk to do it. things like drone swarms and the porcupine strategy, which instead of giving them all the weapons, which is what you thought my position was, that's my position, to make it very difficult to perform a landing on the island. You make it very difficult to get your soldiers across that ocean, then you can keep them on the other side of the fucking ocean. Like, I think the Ukrainians have shown what sea drones can do to prevent naval landings, prevent naval activity. Why can't I say that we should do the same thing with Taiwan so the Chinese can say whatever they want, but to actually pull it off, they're going to have to sink a lot of infantry divisions into the sea? The case is when the largest powers in the nations have nukes, that's not a response to anything I said. But again, my position is we can't all have nukes because the more nations that have nukes, the more chances for failure, the more chances for one of these things to go off. And then, I mean, I already don't like Pakistan and India having it. I don't like Israel having it. There's a bunch of countries that I don't like the Russians having it. The Russians have kind of gotten there on the ground floor, though. Can't do much to stop that shit. But they got it. Don't like North Korea having it either. I mean, obviously, there's a bunch of countries that, you know, I could look at and say, no, they have conflicts with a country that could spiral out of control. Hell, that's also true of the United States. There's also problems of mismanagement of nuclear weapons. So I would prefer if we lessened our stockpiles instead of expanded it to a global scale. I am not only talking to you, Dylan. I reply to chatters as well. Well, then at me if you talk to me, because you just post messages and don't indicate who you're talking to. But I think we're already done anyway. Sure, SM57s are good, cheap, and really durable. Good for almost anything. Yeah, I really should get another mic. I say nuke England since they won't help. Thanks, Iranian Fatah missile. What a name. I think we'll talk about this this new republic that the Russians are trying to bring into existence tomorrow. The Russians are doing this like social media campaign for a republic in Estonia called the Navra People's Republic, like a fake made up bullshit, to try to suggest that there's like a Russian separatist movement in Estonia. There really doesn't seem to be a major one, if any. But I'm going to be going to Estonia in like about 15, 20 days. So when I go there, I'll go see if there is one. Oh boy. Okay, with that, I think, have we covered everything? We have covered not this new report from the Wall Street Journal on Russian intervention, but we can do that tomorrow. We can do that tomorrow. It's getting near midnight. Okay, everybody, I will see you guys tomorrow. I'm going to go to bed, or I'm going to read a book. I'm going to read a book. The book is If I Die in a Combat Zone, Box Me Up and Ship Me Home. It's a Vietnam book. My grandfather, the man who raised me, was a Vietnam vet. He died last year, and trying to read more books about the war. I hope you guys have a good one. I'll be back tomorrow, so I hope you tune in for that. We'll be talking about Russia's attempt to do another Donetsk People's Republic in Estonia. And we're also going to be talking about the reporting continuing to expand on Russian intervention in the Iran-U.S.-Israel war, as they continue to provide Iran with drone technology, drone advice, and components that allows them to upgrade their Shahed platforms. So if you want to support today's stream as we're getting ready to go back to Ukraine, head back to the front, get back to streaming, you can donate at DylanBurns.tv. You can join with people like Longballs, Mako, Dude Tang Zoo, Black-Pilled Kiwi, Scavenger, all these other fantastic people. Sepsin when he's in sight. You can join with all those people, get more emote choices, and know that when you donate, every single dime goes towards the show. None of the money goes towards YouTube executives or Jeff Bezos. All of it goes directly towards funding freelance, on-the-ground war documentaries, paying fuel costs, paying transportation costs, paying rent costs for locations we got to stay at, paying anything for safety, paying anything for food, helping us make sure that we can get this get the show going, get this filming done. So we're going to be releasing that ICE documentary in the near future. I'm going to be getting my draft back very soon. Excited to release that to you guys. If you want to follow, see my documentary when it releases, Dylan Burns TV on YouTube, hit the notification bell, or Dylan Burns TV on Instagram, Blue Sky, or Twitter for official channel updates or pictures of my time in the war, especially Instagram for the pictures. You can also follow me for my personal opinions at Dylan Burns 1776 on Twitter. Join the Discord. We got a pretty good Discord community. We got a pretty good Discord Ukraine-Russia updates channel where people just drops the links as the news comes in, so you can tune in a few times every day, see if you missed anything. And if you want to email me, you can always reach me at dylanburnstv@gmail.com. You want to sue me for defamation? You want to give me a piece of your mind? You want to ask to come on the program because you disagree with me? You have an advertisement thing. You're a CIA agent looking to pay me out for all of my pro-Taiwan propaganda. You can contact me at dylanburnstv@gmail.com. They're still arguing in the chat there. I see them. They're fucking going ham at it. They're fucking swinging at each other. See you guys tomorrow. Hopefully, I think I'm going to message Westside Tyler because I know he wanted to talk to me. And I think I'll have some free time tomorrow maybe for a conversation. So we'll see if we're having a talk with him tomorrow on whether or not it's inconsistent to want to bomb Iran while not supporting Ukraine when it comes to the issue of non-proliferation, which is the radical opposition to Hassan's position of everyone should have a nuke, which is maybe we should have less. Anyway, we'll talk tomorrow. See you guys later. Good night and good luck, everyone. Love you all. Bye-bye.